Yeah. Yo, they built a vault, call it BSR. Bitcoin reserve, but it's built on a scar. Silk Road fell, 44 free K, BTC snatch. Ulbricht got life, while the feds got the stash. Venus Act passed, Senate's on the move. Digital tyranny, they got something to prove. Yeah. Hail to the thief, they stole our dreams. Bitcoin reserve built on our screens. I was Zano, confidential layers the key. BTC, ETH, BC's private, now we free. Trump's in the game, 69K more. Zhong's 50K, Bitfinex 94. Civil asset theft, they stack their hoard. Sacks in a lair, PayPal's old sword. Stablecoins track us, Tether's a spy. But Zano's got us, confidential we fly. Yeah. Hail to the thief, they stole our dreams. Bitcoin reserve built on our screens. I was Zano, confidential layers the key. BTC, ETH, BC's private, now we free. They watch every move, dollars a snitch. Tether, USDC, they making me twitch. Civil theft, they seize what's mine. But Zano's my shield, confidential's divine. Hail to the thief, they stole our dreams. Bitcoin reserve built on our screens. I was Zano, confidential layers the key. BTC, ETH, BC's private, now we free. Hail to the thief, but we'll rise again. Crypto's our fight, we'll break the chain. Freedom's the goal, we'll make it true. Zano, confidential, we'll see it through.
As a technocrat, let's dive in. In the early 20th century, a movement began to develop around a political theory known as technocracy, a system wherein management of governments is handled by technical experts, often involving technology-focused solutions. Early proponents of technocracy claimed that the concept would lead to better management of resources and the protection of the planet. However, this system of governance by technological experts and their technology would also involve a loss of privacy, as well as centralization of power and the management of all human behavior. Although the term appears to have been largely forgotten, the technocratic philosophy and influence can be seen everywhere in our modern digital world.
Already beginning to arrive at the huge civic auditorium, where a large receptive audience turned out to hear Howard Scott as he warned of an impending crisis in America's domestic and foreign affairs.
One of the most influential proponents of technocracy was a man named Howard Scott, a writer who founded the Technical Alliance in New York City in 1919. Scott believed that business owners lacked the necessary skills and data to reform their industry, and thus, control should be handed over to engineers. The technocrats publicized their vision of a centrally planned world via books, speeches, clubs, and political parties. This resulted in a brief period of popularity in the US and Canada in the years following the Great Depression. As politicians and economists searched for a solution to the financial calamity, the technocrats imagined a world where politicians and business owners were replaced with scientists, engineers, and other technical experts who would manage the economy. However, in the 1940s, mainstream interest in the technocracy movement seemed to dissipate. The ideas that underpin the technocratic vision received a notable endorsement in 1970 when political scientist Zbigniew Brzezinski released his book, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. Brzezinski will be familiar to long-term researchers of the ruling elite. Until his death in 2018, Brzezinski was a diplomat who ran in the same circles as David Rockefeller and former Secretary of State and accused war criminal Henry Kissinger. Brzezinski served as advisor to several presidents, from Jimmy Carter to Barack Obama. He was also a member of the Atlantic Council, the National Endowment for Democracy, and the Council on Foreign Relations. Although Brzezinski's book Between Two Ages substituted the term technotronic for technocratic, the depiction of the future is the same, a world in which the scientific and technological elite centrally plan the lives of all humanity. Essentially, Brzezinski's vision is a technologically advanced, authoritarian-style collectivism wherein individual liberties are subordinated to the apparent needs of the collective. When we examine the world of 2025, we clearly see the signs of technocratic influence. For example, we can see this influence in the wealthiest companies and the most influential CEOs. These individuals are running companies that have amassed large amounts of financial wealth as well as unfathomable amounts of digital data on all of their customers. From Jeff Bezos at Amazon, Bill Gates of Microsoft, Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX, we can see the technocratic ideology. These men and their colleagues in various technological industries wield immense power through their companies, wealth, and cultural influence. These individuals have enough money, resources, and connections to shape elections, geoengineer the climate, and cause dips in the stock market, to name a few examples. They are the technocratic class of 2025.
From Silicon Valley to the Spanish shore, fighting for freedom, but they want something more. 10 months in prison just for speaking his mind. Now they're coming back trying to leave him behind. 109 years for following the law. Most corrupt case that you ever saw. They can't silence the truth, they can't change what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free, free Roger Ver. Free Roger now. Hired the best lawyers, did everything right. Still they raided offices in the dead of night. Used his own compliance as evidence of guilt. Now his freedom hangs on the empire they built. Speaking truth to power comes with a price, but we won't let them sacrifice. Oh, they can't silence the truth, they can't change what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free Roger Ver. Free Roger. Come for one of us, they come for all. Either stand together now or watch freedom fall. They can't silence the truth, they can't change what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free, free Roger Ver. Free Roger
All right. Good evening. Welcome back to the Aaron Day Show. This is season 2, episode 14. It's been a long day. We didn't have a show last week. I was still recovering from the fast, and so quite a bit to go through. Actually, this is a very timely and important episode. As you know, I've been covering CBDCs for a couple of years, but in particular, the last big article that I wrote for the Brownstone Institute was focused on the issue of stablecoins as a backdoor CBDC. This is a real serious problem. And I can't express clearly enough that the threat of digital tyranny through programmable digital money is 10 times worse now than it was a year ago. Even though the majority of people think that because Trump reversed Biden's executive order, because he came out and explicitly said that he signed an executive order against CBDCs, people think that we're safe. This stablecoin situation is much worse than if we had implemented a CBDC directly. And I will explain specifically why. But, the too long didn't read of this is essentially that while Biden was great at lawfare, he sucked at implementing technology. He sucked at the implementing of the CBDC. But with stablecoins are already popular. Stablecoins already have a lot of adoption. So what the government is doing is they're using the legislative process to construct a scenario where essentially the government is going to end up taking control over the stablecoins through legislation. Not that they're going to be running the stablecoins, but they're going to control the essentially censorship aspect of it, all of the reporting requirements. They're going to put up a whole bunch of barriers so that in essence, only large regulated financial institutions can run it. Well, if JP Morgan is running a stablecoin, it's no different to you and me from the Federal Reserve running it, from the standpoint of the tracking, programming, and censorship of the money. So this is a serious problem, and the bill is in front of the Senate now. This is the Genius Act. It failed by one vote, but then they revived it, and it seems very clear that they have the votes. So it looks like as early as August, September of this year, this legislation is going to pass. So I want to talk about the implications of this, because this is kind of a DEFCON situation, because just as the US is doing this with stablecoins, we have a scenario where the rest of the world is saying, hey, if the US does this backdoor CBDC, then what that means is the digital dollar is going to be the global reserve currency. And now they're all trying to play catch up to the point where the EU is talking about now launching a digital euro, a CBDC, EU CBDC, as early as October of this year. So this has basically just accelerated the race forward. Everybody loses if CBDCs and stablecoins as backdoor CBDCs are implemented. And so we would not be moving at this pace if the election had a different outcome, which isn't to say that I'm supporting a different outcome, but what I am trying to say is the complacency has to stop. And more importantly, we have to immediately start moving to alternatives. Now, the good news is, and the other part of this talk is going to be, there have been so many developments within the Zano ecosystem just in the past 90 days that Zano is now ready for prime time in terms of actual mass rapid adoption. So there are solutions to, government regulated, transparent stablecoins. For instance, a privacy stablecoin called Freedom Dollar on Zano. There is already now a peer-to-peer marketplace online where you can sell things through Zano. A lot of other developments in terms of new wallets and new exchanges being added. So now is the time where we can actually start talking about working together to focus on actual adoption, on people using and adopting these technologies for day-to-day commerce, for peer-to-peer transactions, because that is the only way we are going to defeat these centralized solutions. And so I'm actually probably more excited now than I was even when I first learned about Bitcoin, because the tech works and the people around this ecosystem are actually focused on the right thing. There are principled people that are dedicated to decentralization. They're dedicated to censorship resistance. They have a long track record at doing this. And so this isn't a like hijacked situation like Bitcoin, where some people, it turned out, just wanted to be technocrats or wanted to become bankers and, are perfectly fine with hobbling the technology and having it be completely transparent. This is not the case here. This is all of the people that thought Bitcoin was going to be the solution to central bank tyranny are starting to kind of consolidate around this and put effort around it. And I think that's really encouraging. So prior to going into that, so 2 weeks ago, I did episode 13, where I broke the 40-day fast. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't even remember a lot of that episode. I was in Amsterdam. You may want to listen to the interview. I haven't had time to do clips or anything, but I mean, it was rough. It was really rough the last couple of days. And then I ended up having to do 4 talks in Amsterdam, which is not the right way. So breaking a 40-day fast and then pulling 2 consecutive all-nighters and doing four talks and then having to fly back on an international flight, I do not recommend that. So so I actually spent most of last week recovering, because I didn't really do any recovering from the fast. So I actually had some issues with some electrolyte imbalance, even though I was staying on top of my electrolytes throughout the fast. There were a few things that weren't quite adding up. So it took me a while I had cramping. I had weird stuff going on. I was not able to my mind body connection was a little bit off, but that's now, resolved. I mean, I think my kidney function is the only thing left to be fully restored, but everything is on track to where it should be. But it's been a little bit of downtime. So I encourage you to look at that and watch that episode. And by around September, I'm going to be completely pivoting what I'm doing with Daylight and my approach in general, which I had mentioned. I mean, it's not going to change a lot of the immediate things that I'm working on, other than to say, I think the one conclusion that I've come to is trying to win or, change, perception in the public sphere is a waste of time. The only way we're going to get through this is to help people wake up to the fact that they are programmed and that they are in the matrix, and to teach people how to recognize that, how to understand how they've already been programmed and let that go, and to start to be able to exercise their own free will. Because unless you're dealing with people that are actually engaging in their own free will, all you're really doing is you're playing around in this 5th generational warfare where you're trying to tell somebody else what to think while somebody else is trying to tell somebody what to think. I don't want to tell somebody what to think. I want to help people become agents of their own life and to be able to exercise their own free will. So I'm going to be focusing on a lot of things related to that. And if you've heard me talk about this before, I've spent the last 5 years kind of going down this entire rabbit hole, whether it's fasting or meditation or actually a whole variety of techniques. And before COVID hit, when I dropped out of political activism, that was actually the direction I was heading in. It wasn't until COVID hit, and then I realized that actually CBDCs and technocracy are a threat to free will itself, which is what caused me to kind of go down this path of, in particular, fighting CBDCs. So I'm still going to be actively fighting and doing everything that I can until Roger's free. And along with trying to help people reclaim their free will, I'm still going to continue to work on developing these parallel systems that are outside of the existing systems. But I don't really want to wade into, I haven't voted since 2018. Even though I ran for president, I haven't voted since 2018. And I do not have any hope for the political process. I haven't for a long time. I've tried to talk to people about, starting over from first principles and all this other stuff. And, everybody got so caught up in this white knight stuff and Trump is going to do this. And look at where we are. Doge failed. Elon dropped out. This big, beautiful bill is going to add $30 trillion, according to Thomas Massey, to the debt in the next 10 years. We're not making any progress. Government's not the way. But more importantly, the problem that we have isn't lockdowns. It isn't vaccine mandates. The real virus, as Mark Passio would say, is that we think that we should cede our authority to somebody else, that we should allow anyone to make these decisions for us. And we should not. We shouldn't be asking permission or forgiveness from anyone. We should be taking control of our own lives. So I don't even want to play around the periphery of dealing with this other stuff. It's just, it's a complete waste of time. And actually, I can feel it energetically. It's just whenever you engage with it, it's just like, you walk away, kind of disgusted. But people really can. You can just make the decision of, I'm not going to listen to public health anymore. I'm not going to engage in these systems. I'm not going to use fiat currency. I'm not going to watch television. I'm not, you can make that decision in literally an instant. And then that frees up energy for everything else. Now it's hard to get people there. And this isn't like something that you do at scale, but I would argue one person who's realized that they are being programmed and that they've been programmed, that becomes aware of that, begins to address the programming that's already happened and to take control of their own free will. One of those is worth 1 million of, kind of the people that are kind of stuck in the matrix. I think it's actually that profound. So more on that, but I'm going to spend the summer kind of working through that. So I don't have anything that I'm going to present on that today, but I've been thinking about it and doing things around it personally for quite some time. And actually, I mentioned in the video that every time I do a fast, I have a profound, you have profound revelations because you are so present for such an extended period of time that you can't help but to really think about and question everything around you, the nature of reality and everything else. And so the most important thing of coming out of the fast is just, okay, well, what do you do with that information? So, I'm wearing these glasses. These are blue blockers, but I'm going down kind of a whole new path. I like some of the stuff from Dr. Cruz that fits into some of the other stuff that I've been doing in terms of changing diet and everything else. And so I will start sharing what's going on with that. I'm going to give you as one tip. I get up in the morning every day and make sure I go outside and actually get into the sun and look at the sun, because you want to actually and not wear sunglasses so that you can actually kickstart your circadian rhythms. I've realized that, and looking at a lot of this research, this whole blue light phenomenon that we have, and I just shared a post on this, they've convinced us that we need to stay out of the sun and put carcinogenic sunscreen on our body. And the opposite is actually true. We don't get enough sun. We shouldn't wear sunglasses either, because the light hitting our eyes actually triggers, kind of a reaction and tells our body that, oh yeah, we're lined up and we're synced up. And there are other chemical reactions that go on with this. And so, along with some of the other things that I had previously said about how we've been lied to about nutrition, we've been lied to about a lot of other things. And so I'm making a lot of adjustments every day, and I'll share as I do these podcasts, kind of a new thing every day. And at some point I'll document it, more efficiently. But every day I get up and make sure I'm out when the sun rises, and then when I'm done with that, eat a meal that's almost entirely protein, and I'm making a whole bunch of other tweaks. So I'll share how that's going. But I do like the concept. Whether Cruz's stuff is 100% accurate, I don't accept anything as a belief system. So I'll entertain something, I'll play around with it, see what happens. But to me, I think one of the big takeaways is I do gravitate towards the idea of quantum biology. I actually think our medical system is so broken at a profound level that it's based on the whole idea that we're essentially meat puppets, that we are these deterministic, materialistic creatures. Even random controlled trials themselves, the idea behind this is, well, we're going to test somebody in a clinical setting to try to strip away all of the other variables to see if this intervention works. But that's not how we work. We're all energetically interconnected. And the environment that we're in matters probably more than anything else. And so we try to strip away and screen that away. I mean, it's Newtonian physics. Essentially, we're using 18th science from the 1800s. Even though quantum physics came about in the 1920s, it's not exactly brand new science. And then there's a whole field of quantum biology, which I had already previously experimented with, and I have a bio well and some other things. But I actually completely discount the entire basis of modern medicine, because when you look at it, none of this stuff works. I mean, I think less than 5% of drugs actually cure anything. And that makes sense, because essentially we're in Plato's cave, where people are treating the shadow instead of, they're treating the lower vibration, matter, instead of addressing the higher level energetic issue, and this ties into a lot of other ancient practices. And so anyway, I'll share what I learned as I go along. And again, I'm not saying that I'm an expert. I am saying that the people that are experts are explicitly full of shit, and they've been indoctrinated with bad science and a bad approach. But that doesn't mean I know what the answer is. It just means that I think we ought to start looking for different approaches, and we really should approach decentralized medicine. Centralized medicine is a horrible idea, and it doesn't matter if it's RFK Jr. I mean, I'll rag on RFK Jr., but it's not because I necessarily have anything wrong with RFK Jr. Nobody should be in charge of centralized medicine. I mean, it's 2025. There is no excuse to have a situation where you have a panel of bureaucrats selected by politicians that set the entirety of the range of what is possible for scientific experimentation. It's a ridiculous idea, and it's failed. So anyway, moving on. There's a whole bunch of other updates. So this was a little bit of a surprise. I wasn't originally planning on going to Freedom Fest, but I'm going to be going to Freedom Fest in a pretty big way. They're expecting 2,000 people at Freedom Fest, which is going to be in Palm Springs. I've been to Freedom Fest a number of times, and the last time was like 10 years ago, but I guess it's changed quite a bit. It's going to be a massive, massive turnout. And so I'm going to be doing two things. I'm going to be running two tables. There's a team coming. So my wife is coming, Dan O'Neill's coming, George Johnson's coming. We're going to operate two tables. One, in support of Roger, and another in support of Zano and ecosystem. So basically everything that I've been talking about. So I'm there kind of advocating for him. I'm not a surrogate for him. I'm actually just doing as I have been, kind of going out and try to continue to raise awareness. I'm going to have a keynote speech that kind of is on all of these topics. In fact, tonight's presentation is kind of a warm up for that. It's a pretty important speech. I mean, not that all speeches are important, but this one's, particularly important because of the size of the audience. And I may even be talking, in close proximity to when Ross Ulbricht talks. So I want to make sure that I put my best foot forward on this. But I encourage you to attend if you can in Palm Springs. That should be a very interesting event. And we're going to be doing a lot of hands-on stuff with Zano and the Zano projects, which I'll talk about. And so if you can make it, that would be great. And again, Ross Ulbricht is going to be there, but also then we have Pork Fest, which I am beyond excited about. I just did an interview with Eric Brakey, the president of the Free State Project. You can check that out. And you know what? I have a video. It looks like I forgot to copy it over. While that's copying over, I'll just talk about what's going on with this event. So it's, again, it's Monerotopia and Doug Tuman and I are co-hosting this. And so the whole MoneroCon event, which is in Prague, is going to be live streamed to our tent. So you're going to get all the best developers like Luke Parker and all of the things that are happening with Monero. But we also have as sponsors, we have Zano and Confidential Layer. And so there's a team of folks coming from Amsterdam, from Zano to come out. Sal the Agorist is coming out. We're doing a talk on Thursday with Steve Patterson about hijacking Bitcoin. Joel Valenzuela is going to be on that panel. He's going to do a talk. We're still in the process of finishing the program, but it does look like we're going to have just a huge critical mass of OGs and a lot of workshops, and people are going to be actually using these technologies hands-on. So I think that this is going to be probably the best Pork Fest ever. And one of the reasons is, and this was just announced, Ross Ulbricht is going to be there. And that is phenomenal news that just came out today. I am going to, it's not in the right format. Let me see if I can figure out how to make this work. I'm going to play the video, kind of preview about this. So let me see. All right, see if I can get this to work. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. let's see here. Well, let me try this and see what happens. That's not the right thing. Hold on. All right, here we go.
This case will impact which way we go and what kind of future we're going to have.
This is something very real at stake here.
Of course, we're talking about Ross Ulbricht, who is the person who's sitting in a prison cell. He's been sitting in there for over 2,000 days.
We are Ross.
I will immediately investigate this when I become president.
I wasn't forgotten. I knew someday it would be over and my family would still be there.
Free
So that is really exciting that that Ross is going to be there. So I hope you can make it. And again, if you want, that you can get a 10% discount on the tickets with using the discount code Free Roger. And so, you know, I'm still hoping Roger might be able to join remotely, but it doesn't. I mean, you know, it looks like the timing isn't working out so well. So I don't know what I have no idea what's going on with the process, but I'm not entirely sure he's going to be able to make it. So fingers crossed that something happens. You know, I don't know if any of you are watching this. I will go on a little bit of a rant, but watching this Bitcoin conference, you know, I am really grateful that Lynn is there and that Ross is there, and that's exciting. And I know there's some good people there, but I got to tell you, when I'm watching these talks, I mean, I'm watching Cynthia Loomis there, you know, giving a speech talking about how, you know, generals in the military are excited about the Bitcoin strategic reserve, and watching the stuff that's going on here, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, none of this would be happening at this scale at all without Roger. And I, you know, I didn't see a lot of people. I didn't see any proper recognition. You know, I was kind of hoping maybe they'd announce a pardon or something at this event. I mean, how can we talk about leading in Bitcoin and leading in crypto and have this Biden era egregious lawfare, worse against Roger than anyone else? He's been in Spain now for, I'm trying to keep track, like 395 days, 396 days. And everybody's sitting there celebrating all of this. Yeah, the government's buying this, and you know, the generals like it, BlackRock likes it, and everything else. And it's just, you know, the guy who helped build this and promote it as an alternative to central bank tyranny is sitting there silenced in Spain. It actually kind of pisses me off, which is a bit of an understatement. But nevertheless, we're going to continue to fight on, and I do think that he has a really good shot. I think this is just the slow process. The DOJ. I just saw today that Binance, the case against Binance was dropped, and and that's great. I cheer that on. I cheer on all of these cases that have been thrown out by the SEC and the CFTC, and that's terrific. It's just the DOJ has been bottlenecked, and so Roger and Ian Freeman and Roman Storm and all of the Tornado Cash guys and the Samurai Wallet guys. I mean, all of these cases need to be thrown out. I mean, these are people that were leading in crypto, like the true leaders. And and when you dig down and look at what they were doing, they were promoting freedom or promoting an aspect of the Constitution, like the Fourth Amendment with respect to privacy. And these cases can't continue to go on. But I'll still give the administration the benefit of the doubt and just chalk this up to there being kind of a queue. But I it's hard for me to be patient with these things. But nevertheless, we'll just continue to do what we can. And, and I trust that I know Roger has good people, and I have no idea what's actually going on behind the scenes. For all I know, we'll find out that tomorrow he's free. But, as frustrated as I am, I can't imagine what it's like being him every day. Imagine being Roger and watching, some of this stuff, the panel with Cynthia Loomis and then the other guy, the other politician with his dog. I mean, this stuff looks like a scene out of Idiocracy. Actually, it's worse when you hear the words that come out of their mouth. And so, this entire time, Roger's voice has not been able to participate in this. And that's to the detriment of everybody, including the country. So anyway, that rant over. I'm announcing that. So I'm part of something called the Agorist Cipher that I want to make you aware of. You can go to agoristcipher.com. This is a paid newsletter, but it's me and Sal the Agorist, John Bush, Derek Bros, and a few other people. And we're basically writing unique articles that you won't find anywhere else once a month. It's like $11 a month to join this thing, but all focused on the idea of agorism and counter-economics. So I'm honored to be a part of it. I have a lot of respect for all of the other people that are writing this and putting this together. And I think this is really important content. As I said at the beginning, I'm definitely out of the political system. I'm a huge fan of agorism. I think counter-economics is the way to go. I'll tell you, my first article that I wrote about was about fasting. It was called Fasting for Freedom. There's maybe a paragraph in there about the 40-day fast for Roger, but it was really more about how fasting is a great way for people to, if you're an agorist and you're interested in taking control of your own life, one of the problems with agorism, one of the things that's difficult for people engaging in counter-economics is the power that big food, big pharma, and the fiat currency has. Central bank currency has. It's hard to break out of those systems in particular. And so my article was really how fasting can be a gateway to that. And so I'm looking forward to reading what the others wrote. And I encourage you to check that out at Agorist Cipher. And there's a discount code for 5% off. It's Aaron5, lowercase AARON 5. So if you want to check that out, let me know what you think. But I think it's a great concept, and I really hope that now that people are seeing that, I wrote today, it's like Elon Musk just figured out that it's easier to figure out how to get rockets to Mars than it is to convince an all Republican government to reduce spending. So at this point, even, if you bought into the white knight stuff, you thought these guys were going to do it. Remember, shut it down and all these chants and all this other bullshit. None of it happened. It's over. So then what are people doing next? And I honestly don't know. A lot of it is just cope. A lot of people are sitting around making a lot of excuses. I actually joked, and I know it pisses a lot of people off, but, I watched this show, Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister, which I highly recommend, but there's like a list of just phrases. Rome wasn't built in a day. We need to study this. And, there's like a list of, you could do a bingo card of all of the common excuses. But at the end of the day, government just continues to grow. The tyranny continues to expand. And so, as I said, I'm more interested in finding people that are serious about taking direct action, changing their own thoughts, their own actions, their own emotions, taking their free will back, taking their agency back. Those are the people that I want to hang around with. I don't want to get weighed anymore into these these public debates, other than to maybe occasionally put something out there that, you know, maybe is someone sitting around looking at this saying, hey, yeah, I gave this a shot and, you know, this isn't working, rather than go into a complete pit of despair. If you can just let go and stop putting your energy into this failing thing, it opens up your energy to do literally anything else. And I think agorism and counter-economics is one of the best things that we've got going. Just some other things. Again, it looks like Roger's motion to dismiss hearing is on. So that's June the 23rd at 1:30 p.m. in Los Angeles. So that's Pacific time. My wife and I are going out there. We're going to be flying out right after Pork Fest. And so we're going to be in attendance. I hope you can make it. I hope we can get as many people as possible. One of the things that we can do, you know, showing support really helps. I mean, honestly, there are a couple of things about this. When you look at, you know, the DOJ wanted to send a message. They wanted to shut Roger up. And again, this was under Biden, right? So they wanted to make sure that the guy that was the most successful at spreading peer-to-peer digital cash around the world was silenced so that they didn't have any competition when rolling out their CBDC. Well, we have a different administration now. But, you know, I have noticed that seems to be this tendency of, even though, you know, they might have run on drain the swamp, once the person gets into these positions, the head of whatever department it is, somehow like they take on this idea of, well, this is my turf, so I now have to defend these people, even though you ran on the idea that you were supposed to reform this. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if this is one of these things where even though there's new leadership, they feel like they have to save face. I mean, to me, this is kind of a no-brainer that, you know, it was weaponized lawfare, and he was targeted because of Biden's CBDC policies. Trump has reversed all of that. Let the guy go. I mean, like, just it should be just like with the January 6th protesters. Just let this guy go. And so showing up at the hearing makes a big difference. And, you know, watching Lynn Ulbricht, and I look forward to, I'm going to be on a panel with her at Freedom Fest. I think she's phenomenal. To me, she's an inspiration because she shows that if you actually care about something and you don't stop, you just refuse to quit, you can pull something off. And now she's actually started an organization to continue to do this. Mothers Demand Justice. I probably screwed that up. I'll get the right link and I'll put it into the next show. But she's going to be doing this and helping other people. And so, you know, if we keep up the pressure, then then Roger inevitably, one way or another, will be free. It's just a matter of how much time it takes. And, you know, there was a lot of protesting at Ross's trials. Obviously, the 600,000 signatures, all of that added up. All of that made a big impact. So if you can show up in LA, or if you know somebody in LA that you think might be interested, please pass this along. I want to pack the courthouse. We did this with Ian too. Roger actually helped with that. He helped promote Ian's sentencing hearing. And there were so many people at that hearing, they had to have an overflow courtroom for people to watch the hearing on closed caption TV. So we should do the same thing for Roger and just keep it up so that the DOJ knows not to do this kind of frivolous lawfare bullshit in the future. And they realize that not only are they going to lose, but every day they're going to look worse and worse. You know, trying to weaponize the law to stop free speech, to stop innovation doesn't work. So please participate if you can. And again, as always, if you're watching this, you probably already signed the open letter, but if not, please go to freerogernow.org and sign the open letter. Let's try to get some momentum on this signature count. Again, it's another proof point that that this matters, that people are concerned. And then ultimately, depending on how long this draws out, it means votes. I mean, realistically, I think at the end of the day, part of the way Angela McArdle at the Libertarian Party was able to you know put this over the finish line is Ross had over 600,000 signatures. Well, I mean, it's a presidential election, so if you can siphon off some percentage of those 600,000 people, I know I endorsed Trump solely on this issue, and I was very explicit about it. Wasn't anything to do with the other policies, but that in and of itself, the fact that Ross is now free was worth the endorsement. I know many other people made that same decision. And so we want to make sure we build that kind of momentum. What can't happen is, until this is done, we have to keep this top of mind. So this is why, I tweet, I have a whole bunch of stuff programmed and memes and everything. So, every day, 2, 3, 4 posts go out on various accounts related to Roger. I've got stuff on TikTok and everything else. And a lot of it's redundant and I have it on repeat, but most people don't see, only 1% of people see any post based on some random algorithm anyway. So it's not like people are going to get saturated, but it helps because you don't want to let the momentum die down. And that's the thing that Lynn said, don't forget about Ross. We can't forget about Ross. That was her big appeal and to the audience. And people didn't. And in the end, she prevailed and Ross is free. So we'll do the same. Also, let's not forget about Ian Freeman. Please go to freeiannow.org. Ian's serving 8 years for made up charges. Once again, it was a complete case of entrapment. I was radicalized by his sentencing hearing just because, obviously I know that the federal government is not our friend, but there's something about you still hold out hope that there's some merit to the court system or some basis of truth, and watching them selectively present manufactured evidence and knowing that a jury is not sophisticated in these things and that it's pretty easy to kind of bullshit your way around an issue just by using technical jargon was really infuriating. And it kind of radicalized me to go down this path. And then the thing happened to Roger. And now I'm like, wow, this is insane. So let's try to help Ian. I know I've seen Mark Edge, Ian's business partner, who hopefully most of you know as well, who's a great guy. One of the reasons I moved to the Free State Project, he actually took my phone call, I think in 2006, because I was listening to Free Talk Live when I was in Boston. And so Mark is doing a ton of work to help Ian. I saw Mark in Amsterdam. I understand that Mark was at the Bitcoin conference these last few days. I'm going to see him again at Freedom Fest. And so anything we can do to help Ian, let's do it. And it starts with signing the petition at freeiannow.org. And then the last one that I have on this list is Roman Storm, which he's at freeromanstorm.com. Another situation where the government has dropped the sanctions or whatever against Tornado Cash, but they're still going after all of the developers. And so Roman is now a citizen of the U.S. The other 2 developers are not citizens of the U.S., but that doesn't mean that they also shouldn't be pardoned. They should all be pardoned. But Roman is, unfortunately, he's fighting his case in the Southern District of New York. I believe his trial is in July. So let's help him as well. Sign his petition at freeromanstorm.com. And let's get all of these people back. Again, these criminal cases are the real heroes. I mean, again, these are the people that really innovated. And we're really focused on protecting our rights, protecting our privacy, and spreading these alternative currency systems to stop war, violence, and tyranny around the world. These are the last people that should be facing criminal charges. I've played this before. I'm going to play a short version of this just because is a lead in to tonight's topic about stablecoins, because I want to set the stage for why all of this is important, right? Like, so much is lost. Whether I'm doing workshops or traveling or doing podcasts or watching the Bitcoin conference, we've lost why crypto is important, why it started, and what it is that we're up against. So I'm going to play a short clip.
I grew up in the U.S. and I see all these people like, yeah, nuke everybody in the Middle East and kill them all. And then they have the former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, on 60 Minutes, one of the most popular news shows in the U.S. And they asked her, they said, like, there's reports that more than 500,000 Iraqi children have died as a direct result of U.S. sanctions. And she looks back at her with a straight face and she goes, it was a really tough decision, but I think that it was worth it.
Is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Worth murdering 500,000 kids? because of what the government did, and I apologize for crying, but it just disgusts me from my core when I see government people murdering people around the world. It's not just theoretical, these are real people with real lives. And Bitcoin has the power to undermine everything they're doing to people around the world. And I'm sorry for shouting, but it just disgusts me what these people in government do. And they do it through central banking and through the control of the money supply, and Bitcoin takes that away from them.
I play this clip everywhere I go. I play it in Amsterdam. This is one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about supporting Roger. And actually, there are a lot of reasons to support Roger because of what's gone on with his case. The DOJ lied to the grand jury at the outset, concealed information that showed that Roger was trying to comply with the law. They violated his attorney-client privilege. They sent armed IRS agents to his attorney's office. And basically what they're saying is, he relied on these experts and he hired the best people in the world to figure this out. And they're basically saying, well, you can't even rely on your counsel anymore. We're going to retroactively come after you 10 years later, not even tell you how much you owe. And then when you try to fight extradition, we're going to claim that you're a fugitive. And so all aspects of this affect everyone. Everyone has a right to attorney-client privilege, the right to rely on counsel, and no one should be in a situation where the federal government is lying to a grand jury in the first place. But so all of that is true. That's not why I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate because when you see his righteous anger, when he talks about Madeleine Albright, or if you see him from the very first time I heard him talk in 2012, to even when you see him in the video that he produced a few months ago, he's passionate. He has righteous anger about what's going on. And it is wrong what these central banks and authoritarian governments are doing with this fiat currency that they print out of thin air. They're spreading war and destruction, and they're doing it to make a profit. There's no morality involved in it at all. In fact, it's immoral, and he's taking a stand against that. That's what they want to crush. They want to kill that spirit. They don't want people who are moral, who speak out about it passionately, and who take action. And they want to kill that in him, and they want to kill that in all of us, because they want us to be obedient, and they want us to fit into this technocratic regime. And we cannot let them do that to him or to anyone else. That's, and how many people are passionate like that? I mean, how many people, again, I don't want to pick on this Bitcoin conference, but all of this stuff is just fake. No one is doing like why are people doing this? You don't get any sense of, I get no soul or passion or energy out of any of this stuff. And beneath all of this, Roger believes, rightfully so, that by separating money and state, you can spread freedom through voluntary interaction everywhere in the world, regardless of, your background or socioeconomic status. And so that's what they wanted to stop. That's what Biden wanted to stop, because that was in conflict with CBDCs, and CBDCs, the control system. And so we should always stand up for people like that. So crypto was always about separating money and state initially. It was about spreading freedom. It had nothing to do with a store of value. It had nothing to do with governments buying these things. It had nothing to do with the current application. This came about after the financial collapse in 2008. But the situation is different now. And I'm not going to go into all of hijacking Bitcoin or spend a lot of time on this. But I will say, wherever I go, unless it's a crypto conference or a Liberty conference, no one knows about any of this. 99.9% of the population has no clue that retailers were accepting Bitcoin, that the purpose of Bitcoin was to be peer-to-peer digital cash. They have no clue. For most people, all it is and all it ever has been is something you're supposed to buy through and hold through a third party and treat like digital gold. And that's a travesty, because in 2009, yes, we had a financial collapse, and yes, we have all this other tyranny. We're facing a much bigger threat now, though, with technocracy. And because we failed to get adoption of crypto as a medium of exchange, and because governments and central banks understand the power of the technology if you use it in a way that is centrally controlled and programmable and censorable. Now we're behind. Now we're like a decade behind. We had a lead and now we're way behind. And if we don't catch up, and if we don't provide off ramps and an alternative, then we're going to have no choice on anything in our life. So it's mission critical. And what I don't hear, and this is even going to crypto conferences or going on to X spaces with people who have been in crypto for over a decade, I hear quotes like this: stable coins are great for crypto adoption. I guess we lost on the medium of exchange and we should just accept stable coins. It's this defeatist attitude. But if we give up on medium of exchange, then we're essentially giving up on free will. You can't just say, well, we're going to have a little carve out maybe for DeFi. If you are unable to buy and sell things and engage in day-to-day commerce without using a centrally controlled programmable currency, then you know, this other stuff doesn't matter. So we can't concede on this point. As to the point that stablecoins are great for crypto adoption, they're the opposite of crypto adoption. And I'll get into this when I talk about, you know, what's going on with these stablecoins. But what is going on here is we are both fast tracking our way into backdoor CBDCs while at the same time accelerating the funding of the US government. And so this is a really, really important point that I'm going to dwell on, but I'll give you the preview now. When you hear David Sachs and when you hear the Treasury Secretary and others talk about why they're excited about stablecoins, it's because a couple of weeks ago, they went to go sell treasuries and there wasn't enough demand for selling treasuries. Our debt has been downgraded. Other countries and people don't want to buy US debt. These stablecoins are a way for the government to finance the $30 trillion of additional debt we're going to incur over the next 10 years. And we've increased our defense spending to over $1 trillion a year. We have endless wars, an endless welfare state, an endless warfare state, endless public health, and we're just expanding all of it. We have no way to pay for it. But because they've managed to gin up all of this interest in stablecoins, when Tether and USDC issue new stablecoins under the legislation that's being drafted, it has to be backed one-to-one by treasuries and dollars. So in other words, Circle, the company that owns USDC, and Tether, or whoever acquires them, which is more likely the case, will have to buy US treasuries in order to issue the stablecoins. This is how they're going to solve their rampant spending and complete lack of any fiscal constraints. So participating in these stablecoins is not only signing up for a leash and signing up for all of your financial transactions to be more surveilled than they are, but now you are participating when you use these things and funding all of the wars and all of the tyranny around the world. And I've not heard anybody express that, and I'll go into more detail about that, but it is critical that this is understood. And again, I've talked about this several times. I'm not going to go through all of it. The end game here, though, is not just to tokenize and control digital money. That's the starting point. Then they're going to centrally tokenize every other asset that we own: our stocks, our bonds, our houses, our cars, the Internet of Things. Everything is going to be tokenized and able to be shut off and tied to CBDCs. This is the end game. This isn't theoretical. I wrote an article about it. You can find it on Brownstone. The title of it is "You Might Own Nothing Sooner Than You Think." Really long article, but I lay out technically what's happening, not theoretically, what the programs are: regulated liability network, who's behind it, who's funding it. It isn't theoretical. It's been actively worked on. So while we've been sitting around, while Bitcoin Core is having an internal debate over whether they're going to make the block size smaller and add more artificial constraints, these people have been spending hundreds of millions of dollars building systems that can digitize and control every asset on Earth. So that's what's going on. As to CBDCs, again, today there are 134 countries representing 98% of the global GDP working on CBDCs. I've talked about this A bunch. Probably most of the talks that I've had. But here's the new kind of twist on this. The CBDCs that have been rolled out, this says 3 have been launched. It's actually 11 that have been launched, but there are some in Eastern Caribbean countries that have moved back to pilot stage, but they're still going to go back to full deployment. Most of these rollouts have been slow. Even in China, the rollout has been slow. It's still ongoing. Nigeria's initial rollout was a disaster, but they haven't stopped their plans to continue to roll out the CBDC, despite the fact that their head of their central bank was arrested and everything else. They're pushing forward because this is all about control. As I mentioned, the EU, this October, they may be rolling out a CBDC, but it's still slow adoption because people aren't in. When you see the polls and the surveys, people either don't know about CBDCs or a lot of people have a negative view on it. But stablecoins have actually had very brisk adoption. And so by backdooring that, you're actually leapfrogging. So let's say Kamala Harris had won and she tried to implement a CBDC. It would take her 5 to 10 years with a homegrown CBDC to get the level of adoption that the US is going to get by using this legislation to essentially backdoor the popular stablecoins that currently exist. And there's a Tether and USDC are indistinguishable from a CBDC in terms of the fact that they're transparent, they're trackable, they're seizable, they're censorable, and all of this. And we saw this, yesterday, that guy that launched the Malay coin in Argentina or whatever, on the S2E or whatever blockchain, his funds, his USDC was frozen. Tether USDC, all of these things, they've been freezing these for a long time. They already are working with law enforcement. They're already working with the FBI and the CIA and Interpol and everybody else. That's been going on for a long time. The legislation that's coming is only going to tighten that so much more and make that even easier. So it's a complete step in the wrong direction. So at the end of this process, all of our assets are tokenized on one global framework that can be centrally controlled. And then the final step is to flip the switch so that the CBDCs or the digital currency is backed by energy credits as opposed to whatever it's backed by now, which is IOUs from the government. But the whole point of this is what the technocrats have been trying to engineer since the early 1930s. And I encourage you to, if you didn't see it at the very beginning, I played Derek Brose's clip, short 3 or 4 minute clip, where he walks through what technocracy is all about. It's fascinating. I was in Amsterdam and I had an interesting dinner, and I was trying to explain to some people what technocracy was, and smart people, they'd never heard of technocracy, weren't familiar with the movement at all. But it's horrifying. This whole technocracy movement from inception has been about the idea that, as plebs, we're too stupid to make decisions for ourselves. We will wipe out humanity unless the best and brightest scientists and engineers, who are handpicked by the elites, make decisions for people. And at the heart of it is manufactured scarcity around energy, and in particular around carbon credits. So you have to have these scientists and engineers basically developing social credit systems, and you're using this energy credit thing because you've come up with this story about manufactured, scarcity, so on and so forth. Well, this is now playing out. And you can see this with the Doconomy MasterCard. All of this is being implemented. MasterCard, type in MasterCard Green Program, and you'll see the list of over 150 multinational corporations that are already tracking the carbon utilization of their goods and services. And then MasterCard has figured out how to tie that in to the use of your money. And so with this Doconomy UN branded card, if you use too much carbon, it already shuts off. So everything I'm telling you isn't theoretical. This is stuff that's been in the works for 90 years. And we just now, when they were talking about this in the 1930s, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have AI, and we didn't have digital currency. We have all of the ingredients in place. And so they're doing all of this stuff behind the scenes. And we're sitting here with fucking meme coins and NFTs and talking about, can we make our blockchain slower and more expensive so that, small groups of developers can make more money developing solutions on top of it. It's, the problem with the infighting within crypto is it completely ignores, from a competitive perspective, anything that's going on in traditional finance, anything that's going on with central banks, anything that's going on with government. And you have to take all of these things into consideration. So Larry Fink has talked about the tokenization of stocks and bonds. I've talked about this before too, so I'll go through it quickly. The problem is money that is issued by the state. And we have these three different players that like to point the finger at each other. And the whole issue with CBDCs is, you know, everybody's like, well, you know, the Federal Reserve is the problem. We're worried about the Federal Reserve issuing this currency. Well, the Federal Reserve is useless. All three of these parties are useless. We need truly separation of money and state. Understand that the commercial banks, particularly the large ones, own the Federal Reserve. But when it comes down to things like financial surveillance and the programmability of money, that is actually issued by Congress. So all of these things like the Bank Secrecy Act, which was issued in 1970, this was the beginning of anti-money laundering laws. If you remember the Godfather movies, I can't remember, I think it was the first one. They actually have a scene where there's a congressional hearing on organized crime. Well, actually that was modeled off of basically, you know, the discussions that were going on around the Bank Secrecy Act. The Bank Secrecy Act in 1970 was designed to end organized crime. Well, how is that working out? Organized crime hasn't slowed down at all. In fact, it's not hilarious. It's actually, it's just disgusting and frustrating now because we have this war on drugs that's going on forever. So now we're going to go after the cartels. Now maybe we're going to drone bomb, you know, we're going to do all this other stuff in this endless war on drugs, the failed war on drugs. Well, what are these cartels? The cartels, that's organized crime. What are they using? They're using banks. They use HSBC. They use Bank of America. They use JP Morgan. So none of the bank secrecy laws have worked. It's done nothing to stop organized crime. What it's done is punished individual citizens, and it's added a whole layer of cost and bureaucracy. And that was just the starting point in the 1970s. It's been nothing but add-ons since then. We've had the Patriot Act. Then we had COVID era legislation, which added more tracking. And so, but in the end, no organized crime has been stopped. So there are kind of three components to this. Morally, none of these people should have any authority to have any control over the information about our financial transactions. I mean, just as kind of a natural law function. Constitutionally, they shouldn't either. I mean, the Fourth Amendment should trump this. But if you're one of these people that's in the camp of, I'm willing to trade liberty for security, then okay, well, let's look at it pragmatically. Pragmatically, it hasn't worked. None of the know your customer laws, the anti-money laundering laws, haven't stopped even 1% of the money laundering or terrorism. I'll write an article about this because there's a whole kind of analysis on this, but objectively, even if you don't believe in the moral concepts and everything else, it hasn't worked practically. But you have to understand, it's not the Federal Reserve that has implemented this. It's not the Federal Reserve that has pushed for it. It is Congress that has written these laws. It's Congress that has passed these laws. I had this absurd conversation with Ted Cruz at a conference. And at one point, he was trying to put in place an anti-CBDC bill because his claim was that he wanted to protect the financial privacy of Americans, and he thought that the Federal Reserve would preemptively implement a CBDC. That's not really a thing. I mean, it turns out the Federal Reserve is owned by the banks. The banks aren't even pushing, you know, the Federal Reserve doesn't necessarily have an interest in this from the standpoint of implementing all of this control. If anything, the Federal Reserve does provide a little bit of a buffer, because if you think the Federal Reserve is bad, the only thing worse than the Federal Reserve is if the federal government was implementing a digital currency directly. And believe me, I talked to that senator from Oregon, because it was an anti-CBDC panel, and his take on it, I can't remember the guy's name, but you know, his take on it was he's against CBDCs because, you know, he doesn't want the Federal Reserve in there taking their cut, which is respectable. But the problem is he wants to have direct control over the programmability of money. So imagine, you know, this guy and Elizabeth Warren having direct control over currency. So we have to get rid of all three of these groups. But in addition to that, the Federal Reserve and everything else, you then have commercial banks. So when we have the cancellations that have gone on and the debanking, a lot of that is it's nothing to do with the Federal Reserve. Those are the woke policies of the banks themselves. So it was JP Morgan that decided to cancel Kanye West. It was JP Morgan that decided to cancel Dr. Joseph Mercola. I'm not sure which particular financial institutions, I think it might have been B of A, that canceled Melania Trump and Barron Trump. So that didn't have anything to do with Congress or the Federal Reserve. So like this is the holy trinity of financial surveillance and you know, fraud and invasion of privacy. And so we need to excise all three of these parties. And so I want to stress that, because they constantly point the fingers at each other. And so then everybody thinks, oh, well, this is safe. We don't have a CBDC now. You know, we just have JP Morgan issuing a digital token, as if that's actually different, and it's not. And so this is why it's very complicated to try to talk to people about this. I've already said that not only is the EU potentially going to launch a CBDC as soon as October of this year, but they've passed anti-money laundering regulations to ban privacy coins by 2027. So again, once again, there is no evidence that privacy coins are used in any meaningful way with regards to terrorism and money laundering, which is always the big two that they bring up. And in fact, I mean, ironically, you know, Doge did at least unveil the fact that the Treasury Department has $4.7 trillion worth of spending, that they didn't even put line item notes. And we now have found out that our own Treasury Department, whoever was responsible for this, was basically a rubber stamp, never said no to anything. And so our own Treasury Department was funding terrorism. Our own Treasury Department was funding some of these USAID projects and other things. So the number one funder of terrorism and money laundering and drugs is the US government directly. It has nothing to do with privacy coins. Why are they trying to ban privacy coins? They're trying to ban privacy coins for the very same reason Roger's looking at 109 years in prison and Ian is in a cage, because those represent alternatives. And when they roll out CBDCs, people won't want them, but they'll take them if they have no choice. They'll take them if it's rolled out under a context of fear. But the good news about privacy coins is, and if you're reclaiming your free will, as I talked about in the earlier part of this talk, you don't give a shit about whether they ban them or not, because you can't stop these coins. So, you know, I don't look at this woman on the screen. She's not an authority. She doesn't have any control over me. I'm opting out of her system, and there isn't anything she can do about it. And if they ban it legally, I don't care if they ban it legally. That's the point of privacy coins. But they'll make it out like, oh, you must be a terrorist. No, I want to be able to buy, you know, fresh vegetables. I want to be able to buy meat. I want to be able to, I bought raw milk the other day here in New Hampshire, where at least it's legal here in New Hampshire. For now, it's not legal in most states. So we know what's coming, but they want to paint everybody as, you know, they're projecting, because they're the money launderers, they're the terrorists, and they want to project that, oh, well, anybody using a privacy coin, you must be that. But in reality, they just want to protect their monopoly control over being the money launderers and terrorists. And so this is real. And I was in Amsterdam, and then this is what people are talking about. And so make no mistake, we have to focus on adoption of these privacy coins now, and not worry about what these people are doing, other than from the perspective of understanding and having it light a fire under our ass that we can't wait anymore. I've talked about this before. We already have a CBDC. Our money's already digital. It's already programmable. HSAs, FSAs, electronic benefit cards, food stamps are programmable digital money. It's already trackable. It's already censorable. So we already have a CBDC, but adding actually stablecoins add a higher level of programmability and level of tracking. So it just makes our existing system even more tyrannical, but most people don't realize that the existing system is already tyrannical. I mean, isn't it bad enough that your bank is working with the IRS using AI to analyze your transactions? Isn't it bad enough that the NSA is doing bulk data collection? Isn't it bad enough that we have bank secrecy laws and we have the Patriot Act and all of this other stuff? I mean, again, you know, we've already lost 80%, and most people think, oh, well, we don't want to become like China, and not realizing the only difference between us and China is you know, we don't have nice little apps that tell us what our level of tyranny is. We weaponize the tax code and use this digital stuff anyway. We just are oblivious to it because it's not well organized or implemented. And I've harped on this before as another point to talk about the level of tracking. It has been for a long time, I think under the Bank Secrecy Act or one of the others, that anytime somebody does a banking transaction of a transaction amount greater than $10,000, a transaction report is automatically sent to the Treasury Department. Well, they just issued a change in policy like 4 or 6 weeks ago and said, hey, we want to fight illegal immigration. So here are 30 zip codes in California and Texas. And so for those 30 zip codes, any transaction amount over $200 has to be automatically reported to the Treasury. So they were able to implement this not by passing a law, but by changing a policy. So understand, if you think that there's some technical hurdle, these are Oracle and Microsoft databases. They can issue a change in policy, and this can be implemented nearly instantly. And, you know, if you are, and another reason I hate politics, because this keeps on coming up. And again, it goes back to this idea of, you know, the real virus here is that we keep on giving our authority to these people and recognizing the legitimacy of these people to have authority at all. We shouldn't be, and instead what we're doing is we're saying, well, we didn't like what these guys said, but we want to take control of these levers of power. And now that we have it, we're going to implement our thing. So if RFK is going to ban sugary sodas through food stamps, well, that's adding programmability to digital money that happens to be issued at the state level and predominantly run by JP Morgan. So is that a good, that's not a good thing, because the next guy that gets elected might say, well, you know, sugary sodas are fine, but you can only use this to buy insect protein. You can't use it to buy red meat. Why are we giving any of these people any authority to control any of our financial transactions? Why are we putting up with any of this shit? But it's already bad, and it's indistinguishable between the parties. And if anything, the Republicans are actually grabbing more control. They're just doing it in a different way. And the power never recedes. It always grows from administration to administration, regardless of which political party is in power. So now we have stablecoins. And I've talked about some of this stuff before, but there are some interesting new points and things that I've been thinking about lately that I want to highlight. So top people in the Trump administration have been speaking about stablecoins very, very, very publicly. David Sachs, who's our crypto AI czar, who was formerly with PayPal, formerly a venture capitalist, or maybe currently formerly a big VC out in Silicon Valley. He says, we'll foster stablecoins, but only under strict rules. So understand what's being said here. I mean, because it's not exactly, they're not mincing words. And then when you see the legislation, you realize, I mean, this isn't exactly cryptic. You know, what they're saying is, well, these stablecoins that exist right now, we've got to make sure that we add reporting and auditing and backing with treasuries and know your customer anti-money laundering laws. That's what that means. And it means the same thing when the U.S. Treasury Secretary says it. He says stablecoins must be secure and compliant to protect the dollar's global standing. I mean, you know, secure and compliant. I mean, what does that mean? Is cash secure and compliant? This is, they're adding, you know, security and compliance. And so all of this is KYC, AML, and it's explicitly in the acts. You can read them yourselves or have AI read them. I did both because I thought it'd be worthwhile to read the whole. I get so frustrated running these. By the way, shortcut to knowledge. The text of the bill means the opposite of what the title of the bill is. And if you want to understand what the bill's all about, spend the mental exercise trying to figure out who wrote the bill. And by the way, it's never the politician whose name is on it. It's whoever funded that politician. And you can track this stuff and get a pretty good sense of who's behind it and why and what the incentives are. When somebody says stable coins are great for America, what part of America? What is this collective identity that we all share? Because it is not good for me. It isn't good for any of you listening to this unless you happen to, you know, be a banker or, you know, be one of the guys that, you know, funded the guy that led the Genius Act, who happens to be one of the largest shareholders in Coinbase. I mean, it's like 20 people that benefit from this. The other 330 million people are losing privacy, losing control, supporting war and violence, and watching the continued degradation of the purchasing power of the dollar. And then Howard Lutnick, who I'll talk about more, we're going to use digital assets pound forward. I started watching this JD Vance speech. I'll watch it again. I mean, eventually some of the stuff I actually just can't watch the first time. I start watching the first 5 minutes. I'm like, God, this is first of all, this is fake. And then it's also wrong. But ultimately I will watch it, and it looks like all the same thing. So the Stable Act is coming out of the House. The Stable Act. So as a matter of process, what's going to happen is this. Stable Act is the less important of the two. The Genius Act comes out of the Senate. It's going to pass very soon. As I mentioned earlier, it failed by 1 vote, but then they brought it back, and now a sufficient number of Democrats have been bought off. And so that's going to pass. So that's going to be the primary framework. And then there's the Stable Act. But as a matter of process, what ends up happening is when they go to reconcile the two bills, they make it worse. So inevitably, they're going to take the worst parts of the Genius Bill and the worst parts of the Stable Act. And when I say worse from the perspective of the American people, from an individual citizen, from the perspective of our rights, from the perspective of our privacy. And what they're going to carve up to get the votes is they're going to have giveaways that give more control and more power to specific financial institutions and specific individuals and groups that fund these people. This is just how these bills work. And it's always how these bills work. This isn't a mysterious process at this point. It's a disgusting process. And again, we shouldn't put up with this shit anymore, but we do, and that's what it is. The Genius Act is really interesting. So I've been talking about for the last couple of years the Loomis-Gillibrand bill, and this was the original stablecoin bill. And they had tried for 2 years to push this thing, and it was a bad bill. And I had talked about the fact that it was more KYC, and it was anti-stable coins and anti-privacy and everything else. And yet somehow the Republicans get control. So now Gillibrand is a Democrat from New York, and Loomis is a Republican from Wyoming, and we had a Democrat president. And so somehow now that we have complete Republican majorities and 2 of the 3 people sponsoring this bill are Republicans, it's worse. And it's tighter controls over know your customer, anti-money laundering. It's more reporting. It's more control to the banks and more regulatory oversight by the Federal Reserve. Well, who is Senator Bill Hagerty? Bill Hagerty is I believe, a first-term senator. And I looked up his bio. He's from Tennessee. He worked in finance at some middle market private equity firm. And so I'm looking around like, well, what kind of deals did he do? He has nothing. He's not a tech guy. There is no indication that this guy has ever used cryptocurrency or can even spell crypto. Like, it's just not part of his background at all. So how does this guy end up leading this? Well, now let's look at this. And so his primary funding source was Club for Growth. And Club for Growth is one of these interesting things. I've intersected with this thing a lot over the last several years. It's kind of like a lot of things. It's kind of like Cato. If you're following this, so many of these so-called liberty organizations have just completely sold out. A lot of them, the Beltway group, sold out during COVID. And some of these others as well. There's this guy, Jeff Yass, who is allegedly, I think it's based on the reporting, it might even be a C4, is the largest, but he's known to be the largest donor to this. He's also one of the larger shareholders in Coinbase. Well, Coinbase actually worked with the chief legal officer of Coinbase, used to be in Trump's previous Treasury Department, came on board Coinbase as the chief legal officer and worked in conjunction with Circle to literally develop the product roadmap for USDC. So Coinbase and this investor of Club for Growth is going to be a massive beneficiary of this legislation. So this guy is basically handpicked, and you read Club for Growth saying, well, we like the light touch of this legislation. So again, it's kind of one guy and one group bankrolling a brand new senator to come in who has no experience with crypto. But now what you have is this balanced situation where you've got somebody from the South, a Democrat from New York. And so at the end of the day, this is enough to cobble together enough votes to get this thing passed. So I think it's important to talk about these kinds of things, because some people naively think a lot of things about politics that aren't true. Like, for instance, that politicians review information and try to make the right decisions on the basis of doing, an analysis and using reason. These people don't even write the bills, and they don't even read the bills. This is just factual. In fact, you couldn't, based on the length of these bills, it would be impossible for somebody to read this. And so these people have aides that read bills, and then they have somebody else that writes the bills, and then they're getting summaries of what somebody says the bill is supposed to say, and then they're given talking points to go on television. I mean, you watch social media, it's like at the same time, it's kind of like, COVID, everybody's saying, well, I just got COVID, but thankfully I took the vaccine, and so my symptoms are going to be moderate. And then you see all of a sudden, 14 senators basically having the same copy pasta. Well, you see the same thing as people are talking about this. Well, this is going to be clear rules of the road, and the dollar is going to maintain its status as the global reserve currency. It's all the same bullet points. None of these people have read the bill, and none of these people wrote the bill. And by the way, when I talk about this, I'm not encouraging you to write your senator or write your congressman or call them. They don't give a fuck about what your opinion is. Unless you have enough money to pay them off, and it's greater than the other people that have already paid them off, you don't have a chance. So I'm only talking about how this works and what's in the bill to highlight why we need to get out of using fiat currency and to certainly get out of using stablecoins. So that's where the Genius Act is. Now let's talk about the particularly bad elements of these bills. So the Stable Act puts a complete moratorium on algorithmic stablecoins. So for 2 years, there's an outright ban. No one can issue an algorithmic stablecoin. So this is a really important point. Algorithmic stablecoins, and I'm going to talk about an algorithmic stablecoin, what I think is the most exciting stablecoin project in the world right now, and it's built on Zano, which is called Freedom Dollar, and its ticker symbol is FUSD. And so it's an algorithmic stablecoin. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that it's not backed by U.S. Treasuries. It's not backed by the dollar. It's backed by, in this case, Zano. It's over collateralized, so there's more than $1 worth. So the point is, the token is pegged to $1, and then you have more than enough collateral. But that collateral isn't U.S. Treasuries. It isn't dollars. It isn't any of these financial instruments. It's actually backed by Zano itself. And there's an automated market maker that makes it so that you can always swap between Zano and the FUSD token at $1. And so it's a brilliant concept. And in this legislation, in the Stable Act, they want to ban this entirely. And I'll explain why they want to ban it, but I've already highlighted some of it as we get through this a little bit further. There's mandatory AML KYC compliance in the Genius Act. And of course, if you follow me on X, I will troll these people directly. And I've interacted with Cynthia. This isn't just like, I've actually talked to a lot of these people. I've given them my book. I've raised my concerns. And, I've even like Warren Davidson, who's, not horrible as far as some of these have gone. But I mean, he at one point, not related to this bill, he's like, well, we need clear rules of the road. It's like, we don't need clear rules of the road. We need freedom. Clear rules of the road mean that you basically have negotiated something that benefits the incumbent players. That's not what people are actually looking for. People are looking for the ability to create while not being stifled by parasites, but that's a whole separate concept. But it's mandatory AML KYC. And it classifies stablecoin issuers as financial institutions under the Bank Secrecy Act. So this has all kinds of implications. And so under the Bank Secrecy Act, there's rigorous anti-money laundering and know your customer checks, including identity verification for all users. So again, what the politicians will say is it's money laundering, it's terrorism, and all this other stuff for which there is no evidence that even that these stable coins are the problem. The people are using the existing US dollar through the existing system. That is there is no second best use for these malevolent purposes than the existing fiat system, but they'll sell it to people using this whole fear. Well, if we don't implement this, then we're going to have another 9/11 or whatever. So get used to that. And I haven't had a bank account I haven't set up a personal bank account since 2018. And when I did this, I've told this story before. It was at a bank that I already had a pre-existing relationship with. And it was actually when I was running for governor of New Hampshire. So this is a bank that was like a mile away from my house. I had money in there in the past. And then I went back in to open this account, and it took me like over a week. It took me 10 days to set up the bank account because I had to come back 3 different times. And when I came back, they kept asking me questions. They were asking me questions about my hobbies. They were asking me all of these other questions. And I'm like, and then I asked her, it's like, well, what is all of this about? Because it wasn't the person just being nice, trying to form, a local bank, trying to form establish a quality working relationship. I actually asked her about it, and she said, well, it's these new KYC AML rules. So she's actually asking me questions, and she's recording the information in her computer. So now they're building all of this information about all of their users to set up bank accounts. And now this is the same if you set up a crypto account. Now you have biometric scanning and all this other stuff. So this is now going to become part of the stablecoin process. And now they're going to be tracking these tokens at a more granular level tied to all this KYC stuff. Under the Genius Act, there's centralized freeze and seizure powers. It mandates issuers, even foreign ones, to implement freeze and recovery protocols. So this will enable U.S. authorities to seize or block stablecoin transactions. Again, this is all CBDC control mechanism stuff. This is all the same. These are the same features that you would have at a CBDC. And some people will argue, well, at least it's multiple issuers, and so it's a little bit more decentralized. Look, we live in the age of AI. If the Treasury Department, even using our existing older technology infrastructure, can send out a policy memo that says you have to give us automatic reports on all transactions in 30 zip codes of greater than $200. Do we really think the fact that there may be 5 stablecoin issuers somehow gives us more privacy? Doesn't matter at all. This is the big one, though, that I hadn't been focusing on as much because I've been staunchly opposed to KYC AML for forever. It's been something that's slowed innovation for a long time. But the real big point behind this is, and I mentioned it earlier, this strict reserve requirement. This is the whole shooting match to this. And now I'll show you some quotes on this. This is how they're selling the fact that people don't want to buy United States treasuries. Japan and China and other entities that have been previously buying U.S. treasuries are sick of this. They don't want to do it anymore. They look at our credit rating. They look at what we're doing. They look at, by the way, tariffs and trade wars. And it's kind of like, hey, you know what? Maybe we don't want to do this anymore. So what this means is I think Tether is the 18th largest purchaser of U.S. treasuries, at least based on, attestations and not audits. So I guess you're going to have to take Trust Me Bro from Howard Lutnick and his company that his son now runs that manages the treasuries for Tether. You're going to have to take that as their proof point. Actually, the CEO of Tether just spoke at the conference today claiming that they had 100,000 Bitcoin and 50 tons of gold. No audit. Maybe we're going to trust his word for it. But in any event, both acts now require one-to-one fiat or treasury-backed reserves. So in other words, they will have to buy treasuries, and this is their way out. And they're even talking about this as a big thing, as a selling point. So again, these are Republicans that are saying this. Remember this before the election and remember this now. I'm old enough to remember that in the election, we were told Doge was going to come in. They were going to balance the budget. They were going to abolish the IRS. We were going to use tariffs as a way to abolish the IRS. And so therefore, we wouldn't have to worry about the debt ceiling because we'd have a balanced budget. They just didn't they just increase the debt ceiling by $5 trillion? And now they've passed now they're pushing the big, beautiful bill, which has had $30 trillion. But no one wants to buy these treasuries. So they're counting on and literally deliberately hyping stablecoins now because it's the only way they can get someone to buy treasuries. So they need everybody to want these digital tokens. So in one package, they're getting people to sign up for a backdoor CBDC and getting people to fund all of the debt and all of the expansion of government that they're working on. So it's actually worse than a CBDC. And the fact that nobody's talking about it this way is shameful. And you'll see in the comments, and all of the comments that I put back, I'm like, here's a link to my 5,000 word article, which, by the way, you look at. I mean, it obviously goes into even more detail than what we're talking about here, although this presentation has more updated information than I had in that article. I haven't updated the article yet. So some of this is new because they've changed the bills and some of the other stuff is going on. But the core basis of this article, so I'll give somebody the article and their response back is an animated picture of Trump saying wrong. I mean, these people have no idea. They haven't read the bills. They're parroting the talking points of the politicians who didn't write the bill or read the bill. I mean, this is essentially how the world works right now, is just people basing everything on nothing from first principles or knowledge. They're just parroting what they heard from somebody else. But that's how it is. So again, as I said, whether a programmable, trackable, censorable digital token is issued by Jamie Dimon or Jerome Powell does not matter one bit to us as individual consumers. It is the same tyranny. Also, federal oversight and audits in the Genius Act. So subjects issuers to OCC or Federal Reserve regulation with monthly reserve audits. So here we go. We are injecting the Federal Reserve into the middle of this process. And by the way, this is a classic legislative trick. So the whole point of this, and I said this in a previous thing. So what happens out of all of this is now, if you're a big stablecoin issuer, you have to be backed by treasuries. You have to be, or the dollar. You have to be able to comply with the Bank Secrecy Act. You have to be able to comply with monthly Federal Reserve audits. Well, you add all of that up, what that means is they're going to force Tether and USDC to be acquired by large regulated financial institutions. And right now, while there are more than just two stablecoins, overwhelmingly, it's two stablecoins, Tether and USDC, that control the overall market. So we're not going to have this situation where all of a sudden there are going to be 5,000 stable coins and there's going to be all kinds of choice. Oh, I left something else out too. They're also banning yield-bearing stable coins. So that's great. So now you can't get yield on your stable coin. I mean, this is in both acts. And so so essentially you can't earn any interest on this. So this is and in some ways, I mean, again, it's not like people are earning a lot of interest on the money they have in their bank account now, but I mean, to ban yield bearing stable coins, I mean, what's the incentive? What's the upside for this? What is the compelling upside for this? Why would anybody want to do this? So all the compliance burdens and everything else, again, are going to favor large financial institutions. And this, I'm going to skip ahead and then come back. So as we're getting closer to this Genius bill passing, last week, the 4 largest banks put out a press release announcing that they're looking at working together to jointly issue a stablecoin. JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, and Bank of America are looking at collaborating on issuing a stablecoin. Again, JP Morgan Chase controls more than 10% of all the customer deposits in the United States. I think it's closer to 15%, but whatever, maybe it's 12. You add those 4 large banks, and those 4 large banks are the largest probably, we don't know for sure, but probably the largest owners of the Federal Reserve, if they jointly issue a stablecoin, how is that any different than a CBDC? If the largest owners of the Federal Reserve get together and issue a stablecoin, that is indistinguishable from a CBDC. Now, I think, and again, just read, because this kind of thing has happened before. It happens all of the time, where legislators are paid off to put in place barriers that favor the incumbents so that they can chew up any of the new innovation. But I wouldn't be surprised if this consortium is being put together to buy Tether, because Tether has something like $150 billion worth of coins in circulation, backed by who knows how much in assets. So my guess is what you're going to find out of this process now is that it would either be JP Morgan or a collection of these banks will buy Tether, and then maybe some other collection will buy USDC. Well, this does not benefit us one bit. There's no upside to this. I've, in a previous presentation, talked about the ties to the Trump administration with this. I mean, it's crazy. So I already mentioned this guy, Brian Brooks. He was a comptroller and Trump's Treasury Secretary the last time, worked for Steve Mnuchin, the guy from Goldman Sachs, who was involved in the mortgage crisis and everything else. You've probably seen this famous picture of him with his wife, where he's holding up, dollar bills that had just been freshly printed at the Treasury. So this guy was his Treasury Secretary. Then he went to Coinbase as chief legal officer and literally helped shape the roadmap for USDC. Howard Lutnick, his company, Cantor Fitzgerald, just invested $600 million in Tether, and his firm manages all of the treasuries for Tether. Now, how this isn't a conflict of interest? I mean, they go about, well, I divested myself. His son is the chairman of this company. I mean, this is just blatant corruption, and yet it's allowed to flourish. And there's pictures of the guy going down to El Salvador, which is where Tether is now based. And so, I mean, we basically have, the comments about the Trump administration the first time around was that he hired a bunch of insiders from DC. Now he's just hired people from the PayPal mafia and Wall Street. And that honestly isn't any better, because it's because they're, in my opinion, manipulating him as well. And so this is a pretty bad situation with a lot of overlap. But this is something that I really want to stress once again, because CBDC implementation, while it's going on all over the world, the rate of adoption has been slow. It's been slow in China, in Nigeria. I mean, they were like burning ATMs and rioting and everything. That, again, doesn't stop them from continuing to push it, but there's not overwhelming support for it. But it's important to look at what's going on here. The update to this was in 2024, the total amount of transaction volume for stablecoins was $27 trillion. So if you look at this, this is roughly the same amount as Visa. It's expected by 2030 that this is going to jump to $120 trillion. So it's going to dwarf bank-to-bank automated, transactions and Visa. So stablecoins, just within the next 5 years, will be the dominant form of people engaging in transactions. And so the scary part about this is if we go back to, Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and Biden or Obama, these people couldn't get this kind of adoption in probably 2 decades. And so by simply putting together this regulatory package and forcing a situation where large US banks end up owning these stable coins, we're going to accelerate effectively CBDCs. We should call it Agenda 2028, not Agenda 2030 at this point. This is going really quickly. And again, don't look at what I say as, I'm anti-Trump or whatever. I'm anti the political system. I am completely at this point about the fact that we have to exit these systems, but understand what's going on around you. We just passed Real ID. We're doing two things in just the first year of this term that people would have been rioting about if it were the WEF and Biden just 9 months ago, right? So we push Real ID, and I don't know if you realize this, but Real ID in like a handful of states, there's already a digital version of it that you can, integrate into your Apple Wallet and into your Google Wallet. So that's coming everywhere else. And again, the justification for these things is going to be, I wrote a thing, I couldn't find the post, but I made this fake executive order of basically Trump saying, well, we're going to use immigration to implement digital ID, and then we're going to use tax policy to implement a CBDC and everything. I mean, and it's happening. The problem is it's happening and people are actually cheering it on because they don't understand it. But the fact that we're going to have, 30, 40 trillion dollars worth of transaction volume or however much potentially under the control of Congress, because that's really what it means. It means that Congress, if Tether and USDC become under the control of the Genius and Stable Act, then that means that it's Congress that controls the tracking and the censorship and the programmability. And they already have a track record that is horrifying. They are already tracking our transactions and they're already programming our money. So they already know how to do that. They're good at the tyranny part. And now they're going to have a leg up by taking something that has broad-based adoption in the marketplace. So that point, this point that essentially by doing a backdoor through stablecoins will probably accelerate effectively CBDC level adoption by 10 years. And the fact that these will have to be backed by US treasuries means that we're going to be continuing to fund the expansion of the warfare and the welfare state in the United States with no fiscal controls whatsoever. In fact, this will give them a free pass. So if you're buying, I ran for president of the United States with the tagline of, ditch the dollar, halt CBDCs, stop World War III and end the Fed, right? Doing this one thing, ditching the dollar. Understand, if you are buying and using USDC and Tether, you are participating in all of this violence and all of this tyranny. In fact, you're doing it at a hyper weaponized level. So be aware of that. I am a huge believer at this point in time that, of putting my energy and money is a reflection of energy towards the things that I want to see in the world, and understand that when you are engaging with these stable coins, you are funding the things that, if you're listening to this podcast, you are probably against. So what is the answer to this? It's not all doom, but it is intended to light a fire. The answer to these surveillance coins is privacy. Privacy isn't a feature, it is the foundation of freedom. This is the only way to defeat CBDCs and stablecoin tyranny. We have to build something outside of the system. We have to stop trying to integrate with it. At some point, you just have to make a decision. Am I serious about freedom, or am I going to keep, half my foot in the pod inside the 15-minute city and the other half over here, or are we actually serious about it? And privacy is the way out. The challenge, which I've stated over and over again, is that privacy coins have to be as easy to use as traditional finance and CBDCs and now stable coins. That's the key to broad adoption. And I talk to people. I just did a talk today. John Bush had me on, a couple hundred people. I gave essentially a version of this talk. But most of this audience, these are older people that are just they've just recently woken up and they're trying to figure out a way to get out of the system. So I walked through it, and I'm giving them some, which I will to people listening to this as well, some free freedom dollars, privacy stable coins, just to get the ball rolling. But we've got to really focus on adoption now, because we're in a race against time based on the existing adoption level for these privacy coins and what's going on with the EU and the response from other nations who are bringing forward their CBDC programs, because they don't want more dollar dominance in the global financial system, right? They were trying to fight this. And, people argue about this all the time. People are like, yeah, this is great. The dollar is going to retain its dominance. Why do we want any fiat currency? to be dominant. Are we particularly impressed by the morality of what has been done with the US dollar and our fiat currency? I will tell you, I don't have any sense of patriotism. I hate what the dollar is used for. I don't agree with most of it. I mean, if it were a voluntary system, I would probably agree with like 2% of what it's used for. So somebody asked, will every government have their own CBDC? Every government will initially have their own CBDC, but these will be hooked into a global ledger. And then at some point, there's a move towards global government. And this is what's going on with the EU. This is what's going on with BRICS. And by the way, it's even in a way what's going on with the US. I would argue that, you know, what Trump is trying to do is, you know, he's a globalist as well. The difference is that he wants to lead, he wants to be the one that leads it and basically go on an acquisition binge. So let's take Canada, let's take Greenland, let's take Mexico, let's take the Panama Canal. And there are some interesting diagrams on this that, you know, I think suggested that, you know, the formation of 10 different regions and everything else. But obviously the EU's already done this. The EU's already moved towards one common currency, with the exception of the UK kind of, you know, not participating in that. But there's already this move towards consolidation. There's a move towards consolidation going on with BRICS. There's a move towards consolidation going on, you know, with Africa. And so, you know, again, the answer to this is, you know, people are like, oh, well, you know, are you for BRICS or are you for this? I'm for the separation of money and state. Understand, fiat currency never works. It has a 0% success rate. The thing that I don't understand about this is, you know, if doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result is insanity, why would we try fiat currency again? There is no reason to think that currency issued based on debt that emanates from politicians will ever work. It fails in a actually pretty reproducible format and in 7 different ways. And so again, this has got to be about the separation of money and state, but it's even more than the separation of money and state. And by the way, it's not even just about privacy coins. Privacy coins are an alternative to currency. But when you look at global assets, money only represents 5% of global assets. So it's everything else, stocks and bonds and real estate and everything else that makes up the other 95%. What these governments and central banks are doing is building platforms to tokenize all of these assets. So to counter that, we need more than just privacy coins. We need to be able to tokenize and trade these other assets. We need an alternative stock market. You know, we need to be able to tokenize and privately trade our stocks, privately trade our land, privately trade our cars, privately trade whatever it is, whatever you can imagine. We need to have a tokenization mechanism that is private and self-custody. Because if we don't, if we just had a privacy coin, that really only addresses 5% of the issue. And this is the thing that in what I've found, because I've gone to, you know, an equal amount of, you know, crypto conferences versus kind of pro-liberty conferences versus, you know, health freedom, whatever you want to call it, conferences. And even to this day, most people in crypto only associate tokens with memes and NFTs. And that's unfortunate, because Larry Fink, I have a clip that I played previously, is on CNBC's at Davos being interviewed by Sorkin or whatever that guy's name is. And says that, yeah, no, we look forward to the tokenization of stocks and bonds. You look at these financial instruments, I mean, and then you start looking at derivatives and everything else. I think derivatives are like a quadrillion-dollar market. At some point, I actually put together a list of like the top 25 different categories of assets, and money is this really small sliver. So we just need to be able to engage in voluntary trade of any kind, in any way that we can imagine, and that's decentralized and private. So this is why this is important. This is why I'm so passionate about Zano, because prior to Zano, we didn't have that. I previously talked about Ravencoin and gotten involved with Ravencoin. I've been really big into tokenizing assets since 2019. And I've tokenized it. I've tokenized, bought and sold tokenized gold and silver and artwork and clothing and a whole variety of different things. And I like Ravencoin. I don't want this to be, you know, derogatory towards Ravencoin, but it's a fork of Bitcoin, and it's on a transparent ledger. I could see a future where Ravencoin gets bridged into Zano, like through something like confidential layer, where you get some of the benefits of the features of Ravencoin, but the privacy of Zano. I think Zano is very much it's a blockchain for making other assets private, and some of the assets that are included in that are other blockchains, are transparent blockchains, and so that's how wide of a market. I mean, Zano can actually make transparent blockchains good and useful and private, and that's really important. And it's hard to discuss this with people in crypto, because so many people, a lot of people in the Monero communities, oh well, whatever, who cares? It's just NFTs and meme coins. It's like, no, it's every asset you could conceive of any size, and you could tokenize mineral rights on asteroids. You could down to the level of tokenizing information. It can be as small, it could be a digital object, it could be a physical object, it could be the size of a planet, or it could be something really minuscule in size. That's what's at play here. And so so we need both of those things. And so there have been so many developments with Zano in the last 90 days. I don't even think I have them all updated here. I've tweaked this a little bit from Amsterdam. There's so much going on. It's mind-blowing. So I want to walk through this, because the general theme is this. And if I could say anything, I want to try to recruit as many people as possible to say the time is now to start working on adoption. I'm not sitting here telling you to buy it or speculate on it or whatever. I'll give you a reason for why I think it's going to go up in value, but that's not the reason to get involved. The reason to get involved is because you realize that if we don't start trading with each other using this technology, we are going to get locked out, or we're going to get forced into using these centralized systems. The other thing is, we have to get out of this niche mindset of, oh yeah, well, we're in our own kind of unique world. I mean, we need to be able to trade. Private money should be for everyone. The ability to trade should be for everyone. This shouldn't be an elitist thing. It shouldn't be a thing for people that are really good at using computers. This should be for people anywhere in the world. I think that I've said this before, 70% of the world makes less than $10 a day. Those people deserve this as much, if not more, right? They need low transaction fees. They may live in a place, I used to say, well, they may live in a place where they've got a warlord that's taking all their money, but I guess that would actually apply to the United States. So I guess we all kind of share a common interest there. But saw this really inspiring pictures and videos from Africa. There was a meetup in, I believe, Nigeria, 200 people. And there's a growing huge community that has really taken this on board, Zano and Freedom Dollars and everything else. And they're starting to use it for day-to-day commerce. Everyone in the world should have access to private money and have the ability to trade. This is the great equalizer. This is how we share prosperity across the world and stop the violence that comes out of these central banks and authoritarian states. It's that important. It is actually a life and death thing for everyone. It's about everyone being able to have free will. So I'm going to talk about some of the projects and give you some updates. So confidential layer. So this has been built. They're rolling it out slowly, but they've actually built the technology and the technology works. And I want to explain how this works. Confidential layer allows you to take your transparent blockchains, starting out with Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Ethereum. And what you do is you mint those on Zano. So it locks your coins. It uses it's a separate blockchain that does this called bridgeless. So if you're interested in looking up more of the technical details, I'm not going to go into a lot of it now. I might, if people are interested later, go through some of the more technical aspects of this, but it uses a separate blockchain called bridgeless that uses something called threshold signatures, so that there are a bunch of different nodes and no one node has access to your private keys. So it's completely distributed, but yet there's no custodian, there's no third party. So you lock your Bitcoin and Ethereum. You essentially then mint tokens backed by that on Zano, and then you can spend those. So there are point of sale systems and other things, and swapping services, you're going to be able to then spend your privately bridged Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then when you're done, if you want to get back out into Bitcoin and Ethereum, you can burn your Zano tokens, and then you basically exit out to a new address, a new Bitcoin or Ethereum address. So it's a way to, kind of add privacy even to your existing tokens so that you're not as trackable. And I really should do a deep dive on it, because I've talked about how bad people don't realize how bad chain analysis is. It's really bad. I mean, these exchanges are giving up your transaction information, and then you have this company Chainalysis, which has its own interesting story. I think it was started by one of the guys who started Kraken and actually left. He started working on trying to track the Mt. Gox transactions when that whole situation happened, and then started working with law enforcement, and then decided to make a company around it. And so now what's happening is they're building databases of transactions. So they're connected to all of the big exchanges and everything else. And so, but what's interesting about this is people can say, well, yeah, but I never use an exchange or whatever, which, I mean, this is pretty unlikely, because at some point, unless you mined something and then never connected or spent within, there aren't many people that have Bitcoin that can't be tracked. But furthermore, let's say you do a transaction with, let's say you did something with Silk Road or whatever, or the government comes in and raids somebody and says, okay, well, who were these transactions with? So you might have done a peer-to-peer transaction with somebody, but the person you did a peer-to-peer transaction with gets raided, and they actually turn over your information. Well, now all that gets thrown into one common database, so that now they're basically mapping out everybody's transactions. And now there are people that can get certification in chain analysis. And so you have all of these private eyes and private investigators. And so now all of a sudden, business partners and people that are going through a divorce or whatever are calling up these private investigators that now have a certification in chain analysis that can actually access these databases, where it's like they plop in your public key and they've pooled all of this data together, and now they can map out all of your transactions. It's horrible. And in many cases, it's worse than a bank, because I think a bank only keeps your records for like 7 years. Well, the Bitcoin transactions never go away. So if just one of your transactions is tracked, even if you didn't use an exchange, if there was something like I described where somebody you did a peer-to-peer transaction with turned their information over to the government, now all that's tracked. And then they're accumulating everybody's information. So Bitcoin is not safe. Ethereum is not safe. I mean, for the sake of your own safety and privacy. And by the way, and this isn't about, evading taxes or even keeping things from the government. You've probably noticed that was it in France, somebody's daughter, there was a footage of somebody, they were trying to kidnap some wealthy crypto guy's daughter. There's all kinds of kidnapping going on, threats of violence. These things are escalating. There's an Epoch Times article about this just a few days ago. And then the kicker is, I think yesterday, Michael Saylor goes on TV or the day before and says, well, we're not going to do proof of reserves. I'm not going to show people what our holdings are. And then another company today, Arkham, just released, they tracked all of his transactions. And I think they released, I don't know if they released it or they said that they tracked it. I didn't go that level of deep, but okay, now they've already tracked it. So does Michael Saylor not understand how this works? I mean, you can't announce you did this big transaction. At the end of the day, all of this stuff is mapped, and chain analysis, other firms are ridiculous. So confidential layer makes Bitcoin and Ethereum usable again and private again. And that is a massive use case, because what that's bringing in is potentially $2+ trillion worth of buying power into the Zano ecosystem, and you have to buy Zano in order to be able to use this. It's the gas that operates all of this. And so this is why the excitement about Zano is, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, people are going to speculate that it's why the price is going to go up. The reason the price is going to go up is because people have to use Zano in order to engage in useful, private, peer-to-peer transactions without third parties. That's why it's going to be successful. And at some point, I think if there are more than 144,000 transactions a day, Zano becomes deflationary because every time you do a transaction, those transaction fees are burned. And so there's one new Zano created every minute. And so if you do the math based on what the transaction fees are, I think it comes out to be 144,000 transactions a day. And then the supply actually starts to decrease. So use of the system goes up because of confidential layer, because of freedom dollar, because of some of the other things. The supply goes down. Well, I mean, you can guess what the price might happen under those circumstances. So that's one of the reasons to be excited about the price. So confidential layer is one of the things. Another thing that's launched is called Zano X. I believe it's zanox.io. This is an ability for you to buy gift certificates directly using Zano. So I've talked in the past about I use Cake Wallet and Monero and everything else to buy gift certificates. I can now buy the gift certificates directly with Zano. So that's a great site that I encourage you to check out, zanox.io. So again, real world use. So I live on crypto and my preference is my base, and I'm telling you this only, it's not investment advice, but I've said this before. I only put my energy in things that I believe in. That may not optimize fiat, but money is a reflection of your energy. So I put my money where I want to see things go and where I'm also putting my time and attention. So I'm very heavily involved in Zano, but sometimes, I live on crypto. Sometimes I have to swap to Monero or sometimes even to Stablecoins because I've got to pay bills and do whatever. But now I can use Zano X directly. And so now I can buy my gift cards all directly with Zano. Freedom Dollar is a really exciting project. Again, $27 trillion worth of transaction volume last year, and all everybody's doing is buying backdoor CBDCs that are backed by government treasuries. So fund the war machine while getting tracked at the same time. That should be the tagline for Tether and USDC. I'm not a big fan of either. I don't want my transactions monitored or censored, and I don't want to participate in buying treasuries. Again, I ran for president, ditch the dollar. Well, I'm not ditching the dollar if I'm buying Tether. I am funding the creation of more dollars. In fact, I'm funding the creation of surveillance dollars every time I buy a Tether and every time I buy a USDC. Why? Because they had to buy, and in the future will have to back every one of those tokens, one for one with treasuries or dollars. Freedom Dollar is a completely different situation. It is a private decentralized stablecoin. It's pegged to $1. And it's pegged by code and not banks, as you can see on here. And so it's over collateralized. So, and it's backed by not treasuries, but it's backed by over collateralized Zano. So right now, I believe there are 800,000 tokens backed by $2.3 million worth of Zano. And at any point in time, you can exchange your FUSD for Zano at that peg rate of whatever $1 worth of Zano is at that particular moment in time, and there's no third party involved. It uses a peer-to-peer exchange and it's an automated process. There's no human in the middle of that. You can always exchange one freedom dollar for the then market rate of $1 worth of Zano without any third party. So this is, in my opinion, this is groundbreaking, and this thing has only been around for 2 weeks. So almost nobody knows about it. And yet it's already listed on like 20 exchanges. It's already integrated in a bunch of wallets. So this is, again, why I'm excited. And I guess what I'm trying to do is get you excited as well and get people to start thinking about use. And you can use freedom dollars at various places. I'm working on a point of sale system, but there's another point of sale system called Zano.cash. And I also want to say, so I'm working on various projects, but my whole purpose is adoption. And so I will promote any solid project with Zano. My reason, if I'm building something, it's not because I want to build something. Like I built a plugin for WooCommerce and WordPress so that people can start accepting Zano. I would prefer, coding is not my strong suit, but I'll do whatever I can to help spur adoption. But if Somebody else comes along with something better, I'm going to support that. I'm going to support the entire ecosystem. I'm not, because from my perspective, the big problem to solve is to stop central bank tyranny and backdoor, and stablecoins as backdoor CBDCs. That's an existential concern. So I'm for working with all of these different projects. But today, Zano and Freedom dollars are available on these 4 wallets. So there's the Zano native wallet, which I like. And by the way, I use all of these and a lot of these integrations. They're adding new features, and there's a lot of things. Zano has aliases, but the aliases I don't think are implemented in any of the other wallets. And so there are pros and cons to each of these. But I generally, just because I'm passionate about it, I have wallets on all of them, and am constantly testing out the different functionalities. So the Zano wallet, you can create tokens, you can use an alias. It's got a lot of really unique features, including now, if you're using the mobile wallet, you can actually log into other applications like Matrix for messaging. You can log into the P2P exchange. You can log into something called Zano Bay, which I'll get into in a minute, but you can log into it from a mobile device. You don't have to use a desktop and a full web browser. That's actually a game changer, because if you're, if you've been involved in the Ethereum and MetaMask and everything else, that stuff is actually problematic and very easy to hack. So the ability to use the wallet and a browser within the wallet, and the ability to use your alias to log into these apps is a really great feature for security. The Bitcoin.com wallet, I believe, will be, I don't know this for sure, but I think they might be the first one that will fully integrate confidential layer. So that's a very exciting thing about that. And if you're not familiar, Bitcoin.com is one of the oldest wallets out there. I think there have been a total of like 50 million downloads for this. And so this is really exciting, because already within Bitcoin.com, you can buy other cryptocurrencies, you can use your debit card, you can do credit card, you can do a whole bunch of different things. And now they've added Zano to it. So that's great exposure. Cake Wallet was the first to implement Zano. And as you know, I've been recommending Cake Wallet specifically as onboard new people, because it's got the gift cards built in and the exchange and all of these other features. And now it also has Zano and and by the way, with all of these projects, all of the people that run these projects and that are behind these wallets are all ideologically aligned. There have been issues, and there may be more wallets, but I used to recommend that people use Exodus wallet. And then lo and behold, Exodus went public, and now they're a publicly traded company with all of these requirements and everything else. And so they're dumping Monero. And so if they're dumping Monero, they're probably not going to add Zano, because the reason they're probably dumping it is because it's a privacy coin. All 4 of these wallets, the people behind them, support peer-to-peer digital cash and support privacy in a big way. So the Bitcoin.com people, Roger actually is the main person, I think, behind Bitcoin.com. He's not the CEO of it anymore. There's another team running it, but it's got kind of Roger's, I think, Roger is a big main supporter or owner of it, at least. Cake Wallet, the guy that Vic from Cake Wallet is a huge Monero guy. In fact, I think he owns Monero.com, and Cake Wallet really started out as a Monero wallet. So there's a huge focus on privacy with Cake Wallet. In fact, Cake Wallet has Zano, Monero. It has Litecoin with Mimblewimble. And then he's always implementing, experimenting with features like silent payments and other things for Bitcoin. So I like all of these. And then Edge Wallet is Paul Pui. And I see Paul all the time. I've seen Paul in Amsterdam and Mexico and everywhere else. And he's also a huge fan of, he's a big Liberty guy, privacy coin guy, and Edge has Monero and I think Zcash. It also has Pirate Chain, and they've implemented some other great features. So I'm going through all this just to say this is huge, because if you've heard me talking about Zano, most of the time you've heard me talking about Zano over the last year, the only wallet was the Zano wallet. We now have access to millions of people And these wallets will also contain, I don't know if they're going to be whitelisted yet, but at some point, I think the Zano wallet, at least, and the Bitcoin wallet will whitelist the Freedom Dollar, which means you don't even have to go through the hassle of adding the token address into the wallet. It'll just show up as kind of a pre-approved asset. So this is huge for adoption. If you want, I'll give you a free dollar's worth of USD. Just send me your Zano receive address or alias, and I will send you a dollar's worth, just because I want to start spreading this out. The hardest part for a lot of people is just getting a wallet and starting. Like this is the big barrier for this. People get overwhelmed. And I've gone through a lot of content and everything else, but even doing workshops and everything else, people are like, oh, it's this daunting thing. All you have to do is download a wallet and give me your address. Like you're not paying for anything. I'll literally just give you one. I gave away $34. I was on day 34 of my fast. And so I gave away $34 worth of FUSD just randomly to people on X. But this is a good way to get the ball rolling. So you can reach me on Twitter, or I'm on Signal at ard.76, or less preferred is email, art@daylightfreedom.org. But if you reach out to me there with your Zano address or your Zano alias, I'd be happy to send you some. And I think the more people that we can get on board with this and to start using it as quickly as possible, because again, this is by far the best solution that I've seen to Tether and USDC. It's unstoppable, it's private, and again, you're not buying these treasuries and supporting this central bank tyranny. So it checks all the boxes for me, and it has Zano. It's built on Zano and has Zano level privacy. Some other projects, Zano Bay. So this is a peer-to-peer marketplace. I don't want to call it Silk Road because it's not. There aren't illegal products on there, but anybody can join, and you can, as you can see, there's an ability to spend Zano, ability to earn Zano, and I think this is important. When I had my webinar with John Bush today, we both agreed that one of the best ways to get crypto is to work for it, to sell products or services for it. I mean, this is a way to, not have to deal with these central exchanges as well. I mean, so for me, I'm, moving entirely into this. I don't earn fiat. I don't have a bank account. And so I'm entirely in this ecosystem. So if you have a good or service that you can sell, it's new. So there's not a lot of stuff on there right now. I did put the second edition of my book, The Final Countdown, in there, which I have updated to include an emphasis on privacy coins and actually a lot of the stuff related to Zano. I haven't even posted it on Amazon yet. The only place you can actually buy it is on Zano Bay. So I encourage you to take a look. You can associate your alias with your account. You can actually log in and verify using the browser that I mentioned earlier, the mobile browser. You can kind of authenticate who you are. And so there's the ability to build in a reputation management system here. So again, you can't see the individual transactions that somebody has done, but you actually can validate that transactions were done and are tied to somebody's alias, which is actually a huge feature. One of the other features of Zano Bay is that there's a secure chat. So when you set up your account, you get a PGP key, and then you can use that PGP key to send encrypted messages. So this means buyers and sellers can communicate, completely privately. So again, this is a peer-to-peer marketplace, no third parties, with encryption tied into the alias. And then moving forward, there is going to be additionally the ability to implement escrow system, which I've talked about before, which Zano used to have, and then they upgraded the consensus mechanism. They're building it back in, but it's this mutually assured destruction model. So let's say, I want to sell you a $50 baseball card, and I don't know you, and we don't necessarily trust each other. I could put $50 into escrow. You put $50 into escrow, and then the escrow isn't released until we're both satisfied with the transaction. So this way, it's a mutually assured destruction model. We have both have a financial incentive to work it out amongst ourselves without needing to have a third party. So this is powerful. In fact, I have a lot of ideas around this. I hope to talk to the Zano Bay people, because I could see the question for me is, do you have one marketplace, or do you have different marketplaces? Because there are different ways you might want to lay out and rate and do things with products or services, but maybe have the ability to share the reputation management system or whatever. But I don't know. But this is really powerful. The fact that this exists is great. And again, this is another thing that's only been around for a couple of weeks, so it's very, very exciting. There's also you can create private NFTs on Zano. And this is important as well, because you've probably seen there's been a lot of people with these expensive NFTs that have been hacked or identified. And going back to the Michael Saylor analogy, this isn't just about governments. It's actually not safe from bad actors for people to be able to see what you own and to be able to track that down. It's horrible. I mean, we should have a natural right to privacy, but there are other things you can do with these private NFTs. I mean, you can imagine, private NFTs being used as like tickets to an event, where now you buy a private NFT that's a ticket to a concert, but nobody knows necessarily who you are. So you can gain access to an event without having to reveal your identities. There are a lot of applications of NFTs that aren't just, hey, here's a picture of a monkey with 800 different variations that were created in automated fashion using Adobe. There are a lot of cool things you can do. So that's obscura.art, I believe. So, and then I'm working on Kaurma, which I've talked about a lot. And what's slowed it up, and I think I've mentioned this before, is the way I was going to get Kaurma into distribution was through a point of sale system through a swapping service. So what I found that the use case is there are a lot of merchants that want to accept crypto, but they want to get paid in something that's not crypto because of the stability. So now they're going to be, there'll be two options. Now there's freedom dollar, which is great. And in fact, I may even play around with some ideas and talk to the freedom dollar guys and see if there's some tie-ins that we could do with gold and tying in this algorithmic stablecoin process. But a lot of people wanted gold back because even fiat itself. So yeah, you may get paid in a stablecoin. You get that's $1 per token, but the dollar's losing purchasing power. It's lost 26% just since 2020. So a lot of people, if they could, would love to get paid in a coin that's actually tied to gold, because that's actually even superior to fiat. But I need a point of sale system. And because the only way to generate fees and I need fees to be able to cover the storage and insurance cost of the gold itself is through the swapping service. So somebody pays with Monero or pays with Bitcoin, and then the merchant ends up receiving on the other end Kaurma, and there's a small transaction fee that goes to Kaurma that actually covers the cost of running the network and the insurance and storage. So I need that part. Unfortunately, I thought that we were going to have that launched in November of last year. The point of sale vendor, a company called Now Payments, who I've used and had recommended in the past, because of they're in Europe because of the privacy coin regulations. Not only are they not going to be adding Zano, but they're probably going to be dumping Monero and other privacy coins as well. So I'm building a point of sale system that basically does the same functionality that Now Payments was going to do. And I'm in the middle of that. In fact, it's just kind of a funny story. I got really far along during the fast on from day 14 to day 21. And now that I'm recovering from the fast, I'm trying to remember what the hell I did. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, but I got so much work done, but now I'm like, wow, what did I actually do? So I'm doing a little bit of backtracking on that, but that's what's going on there. And so the point of sale system, I'm calling it Quano for now, but I may not stick with that name. But the idea behind it is really easy to use point of sale system, but that will accept Zano, FUSD, and will accept the bridged Bitcoin Cash, and Ethereum. So, and the plugins that I've already created, I consider to be part of this point of sale system. So the WooCommerce plugin that you can download today, on GitHub and plug into your site, I'm going to be adding to those plugins so that you can take these other currencies. So that's going to be part of the point of sale system, but it's going to be privacy first. And no, I'm not going to take any transaction fees. And this is actually part of the risk of this. If you're taking transaction fees or whatever now you're part of the transaction. So there are going to be no transaction fees. You'll be able to log in with your wallet, and it'll be a complete pass through. If there are any fees on it, it's going to come from the swapping service element of it. But in no way, shape, or form am I going to take custody of any of this cryptocurrency. So if you're the merchant, you're going to get paid directly, whether it's a direct, pass. Like if you're taking Zano, you'll take Zano directly. It'll come from, the customer's wallet directly into your wallet just through our interface, or using the swapping service, the cryptocurrency that the user uses will be swapped to the currency of your choice. But at no point will that be in my custody. That will be handled by the swapping service. And so anyway, that's essentially how that's going to work. I'd like to have an alpha of this by PorkFest. Unfortunately, Freedom Fest came up. So if I can't get that done, then I'm just going to use this Zano.cash, which is the other point of sale system that somebody else developed. It looks really cool. That also takes Zano and FUSD. And so with that, I've shown you this before, but just as a recap of where we are, from a CBDC tyranny perspective, the ultimate DEFCON 5 level is one global CBDC backed by energy credits tied into social credit systems and AI and all that other stuff. We're not there yet. That's level 5. We're at level 3, but level 3 is pretty bad. Our money's digital. It's programmable. It's trackable. And if anything, I would update this now to maybe level 4 being a stablecoin as a backdoor CBDC, because that does actually ratchet things up. Correspondingly, on the freedom scale, the end goal for this is, at least in my view, people are doing peer-to-peer transactions with no third parties, completely using privacy coins. And where we are right now is, I'm being generous in saying we're at level 3, but we're at kind of, but with all these new tools that have actually been deployed on Zano, I'm really optimistic that we can start really ratcheting this up. So right now it's like you may use a wallet, you may buy gift cards and all this other stuff, but we now have the tools to start focusing on adoption. So again, I know this went long, but to recap, this is really urgent. The stable coins mean CBDC level surveillance gets integrated at scale, under control by the US Congress, which has already implemented all of this tracking and surveillance through the Bank Secrecy Act, through the Patriot Act, and through everything else. So we're about to take digital tokens and throw it into this legal and regulatory regime that is already ridiculous. And in so doing, we're also going to create a vector for the United States government to sell more treasuries and spread more misery around the world. So this is urgent. This is worse than the outlook was 6 months ago. I didn't even think about this, actually. I'm kind of surprised that I didn't think through the implications of how bad this is. But this will pass. This will pass the Senate. It will pass the House, because there's no one to stop it. And the politicians and everyone else actually don't even understand it, but there's really no way to stop it. But what we can do is combat it. So on the flip side to that, there's a lot of optimism, a lot of enthusiasm about the entire Zano ecosystem and these projects that are live and can be used right now, today. And so what's going on is, between Freedom Fest and now PorkFest, we're going to have an opportunity to be in front of 3,000 to 4,000 people. And so I'm going to work with the different projects in the ecosystem and everything else to come up with some good ideas and some simple ideas and ways of introducing people to this. But this is really a great opportunity over the next month or so to really get people to start using these things. And there's more stuff going on. I'm really impressed with the entire ecosystem. And as a side note, my real belief is that moving forward, these projects are all about people. There are people that will tell you, well, it's all about the code, but we are in a rapid environment with a lot of moving parts where we have to be able to compete. And Bitcoin got bogged down by technocrats and by people that decided they wanted to ossify the code and they wanted to set it in stone. Well, I'll tell you something. One, everything has risk, but this Zano team has been around forever. The lead developer was one of the creators of CryptoNote, which is actually the technology behind Monero. This guy's like an OG, and the Zano project itself has been around for 5 years, but there was even a predecessor project prior to that. So this project's been around for like 7 years. So they've got a track record on this. But I've had a chance to spend time with this team and this guy, Andre, the lead developer. The thing that I'm impressed the most about is he's incredibly thoughtful and he's very interested in seeking the truth and collaborating. So he will actually go out and seek people that work on other projects, so they're always trying to improve the consensus mechanism and everything else and stay one step ahead of the curve. So they're always doing research and very deliberate about what they do. And obviously very concerned about, getting something wrong, but they're researching thing on the cutting edge of everything from, this isn't out of school because I heard him say it in Amsterdam, but they're working on right now, they're 1 minute block times. And they think they may have a breakthrough to be able to reduce this to 10-second block times, where you'll actually have finality of a transaction in, like a minute or something like that. Like it just, groundbreaking in terms of what this means for speed and scalability. They're also looking into quantum resistance. So the whole point is, this is about picking a team because you're going to be attacked by all kinds of different players in all kinds of different situations. And I've been really impressed by Andre, by Pavel, and Val. That's really the core technical team. Pavel and Andre are the two founders, but Val does a lot of the research and actually created the private proof of stake model. And I believe also figured out how to do the tokenization aspect of this. There are other people that are coming on board now to help work on it. I think there's a new Zano wallet coming out with an upgraded UI, and they're really great. And Pavel in particular is the point on this in working with other projects. They're actually helpful in trying to build out an ecosystem. And I think the philosophy for these guys, if you're talking to them, is they're really passionate about decentralization and censorship resistance and privacy. But the view Zano is, again, it's a tokenization platform for tokenizing other assets, and other assets include other cryptocurrencies. So people like to look at these things as, well, how does this compare to this? Well, this helps take Ethereum, take all the great things about Ethereum and add privacy to it. Take the great things about Bitcoin, such as they are, and add privacy to it. So it's something that's additive to other blockchains. What it's adding to other blockchains is privacy. And so it's also adding privacy to other assets that aren't blockchains. And so this is, kind of an eye-opening thing. I might do a whole talk on kind of eureka moments, because I've been studying this now and using it for a year. And there are probably like 5 different points in the process of understanding how it works where it's like, wow, this actually is a major, profound improvement on what already currently exists. It's kind of like the fact that it's private proof of stake. Ethereum, I've never liked proof of stake because I've always associated proof of stake with Ethereum. And Ethereum is like, you have to have a lot of it in order to be able to stake. And then it's transparent so people can see who you are. So that means that people can be leveraged and hacked and everything else. And so it seems like kind of an oligarchy model. And with Zano, it's like, anybody can stake. And when you actually dig into the details of it, it's actually more secure than proof of work. And people never even want to have that conversation. And it's private. It's like, wow, okay, well, there's a eureka moment. And then there's several other eureka moments behind that. So I may try to articulate that. I see I am for I am is here. I don't know if anybody wants to join to do a Q&A or just, make any comments or ask any questions. Happy to go through that now. I mean, I know this went on for a while, but it really is important. I don't know how to scream it from the rooftops enough that like it's a train wreck watching this Bitcoin conference. It is so frustrating to watch, and then it's wrapped in this patriotism and this idea that, yeah, goddamn, we're gonna control these stable coins. And it's like, wow, okay, so you really are gonna cheer on your own enslavement while funding the debt in the war machine. It's like, I know they don't know that that's what they're doing, which is why I'm trying to lay this out, although this was too long of a format, and I don't even know how to convey it concisely enough, but whatever, I'll try to come up with some memes if anybody has any other ideas. But again, I'm not going to ask you to write your congressman or waste any time on that. But if anything, my ask would be, I see mandatory myocarditis. If you could actually just message me this, your address on Twitter, because when this is done, I'm going to lose this. Well, I guess I won't lose this comment stream, but it would be easier if you just send it to me directly, because I've got a whole bunch of requests from the thing that I did earlier today, and I don't want it to to slip through the cracks. And for those that are joining late, send me on Twitter at AaronRDay or on Signal ARD.76 your Zano address or your Zano alias, and I will send you some freedom dollar, FUSD. Again, I just want to get this going. I want to show you how it works and just get you started learning about it, playing with it, because I actually think this is going to be a big deal. You're also going to be able to set up a node to help the network. That's coming soon as well. But I've been really impressed with the team and everything that they've been able to put together. And now with over 20 exchange listings, it's just absolutely incredible, the work that has been done. So in any event, let me, I'm so far behind. I haven't even been able to message the people that normally join for the Q&A. So let me do that. And I do want to try to do these podcasts regularly. I mean, the target was to do this once a week on Thursdays, but the travel's been really bad this year, and so hopefully during the summer, it'll get a little bit more regular. In fact, I have a whole queue of guests and people that want to come on, and really good guests. I'm going to be live streaming in some capacity at PorkFest. So there's going to be a great deal of content coming out of that you can look forward to. But again, I stress, if you can go to PorkFest or Freedom Fest, but definitely PorkFest, please come. Ross is going to be there, the whole privacy tent, saw the Agorism. I mean, and I know what I wanted to do, my entire vision for this was to bring, Roger Ver energy back, because that's so many people got started on Bitcoin in 2012, 2013 because of Roger and his message. And then it's turned into this, nobody's using it and whatever, but we need to bring it back. And I was hoping to not only bring his energy back, but I was hoping to bring him back and have him attend either virtually or in person. And I'm still hoping that that's the case, but man, timing certainly seems to be dragging on a wee bit longer than I would have liked. So, hey, I am. I don't know if you're still there. If you see this, I've put the link to join in the comments. So if you want to pop in, sorry I didn't get this to you earlier. The whole day kind of slipped away from me a little bit. Let me see if they're already. You know what? I haven't gone through all the comments here either. I don't know if some of these people are even there. Has anyone mentioned Roger at the Bitcoin conference? I don't know. There are some good people at that conference. I mean, Mark Edge is there. Angela McArdle is there. Ross is there. Lynn is there. I know Lynn's a big supporter, and Ross is a big supporter. Carla is there from the Free State Project, and some others. And I know they were handing out cards and pens and promotional materials. So I think they were shut down after doing that for a while. But the word is getting out. But I have not seen a main stage speaker talk about it or see any commentary about that. And it's a little disappointing to me. It's not really surprising, but it's still disappointing. Let's see what else. Check out my Free Roger decals. This is from Crypto King Silver Sailor. Yep, I've seen those. Yeah, he's actually selling Free Roger decals on Zano Bay. So I encourage you to check that out. I just hear crypto people cheering for the bill because they think regulations are good. It's for mandatory myocarditis. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they know I think that they're buying the the talking points without thinking it through. When what's his name, David Sachs talks about, it'll be great for American global reserve currency status and everything else. People they cheer about that and don't really think about, well, why is that actually important? Does that mean anything? Does that benefit me? Why is that a positive or a negative? So, I mean, again, for a lot of people, I try to be compassionate about this because I understand that people are not taught about money. The schools do not teach people about money at all. They don't teach people about how the Federal Reserve actually works. So you have to become aware of the fact that you've been fed a completely fraudulent explanation of how money and the economy works. So you have to become aware of that. And then you have to go through trying to deconstruct and figure out what it's all about. And so I know most people don't do that. One of the problems with having Roger not able to talk is that his voice would actually, he could educate people. He has educated a lot of people. And that message is not getting through at all. No one's talking about that now. I find it frustrating that people want a Bitcoin strategic reserve that is built on the stolen coins of the people that created the industry. Like that to me is, when did we, so thievery and theft is now okay? I mean, some of these same people were saying taxation is theft, but now they're perfectly okay with additional outright theft if it'll pump their bags. Freedom Fest and Pork Fest, yes. Freedom Fest is June the 11th through the 14th in Palm Springs, and Pork Fest is June the 16th through the 22nd in Lancaster, New Hampshire. So I'll be at both. I mean, if I had to pick one, I'd pick Pork Fest, although they're both valuable for different reasons. I think Freedom Fest will actually be great for getting this message out. I've been to Freedom Fest before. If you've never been to Freedom Fest, Steve Forbes is often a speaker, and I've been there at various points in time. Peter Thiel has spoken. I've actually spoken there a couple of times. I was on a panel with Charles Murray, the guy who wrote the bell curve, and then I gave a keynote speech that I was thinking about it today. I can't even remember what it was about. So they have a lot of speakers, but in the past, the emphasis was always a big precious metals thing. So when you see the sponsors in the tables, it was always gold and silver. I mean, this was like 2014, 2015, but it still was never a big crypto focus. But this year, I think because Ross is speaking, I think what it is that the crowd maybe tends, and since I haven't been there for 10 years, I may be wrong on this, but maybe it tends to be a little bit older, but this might be a way to bridge some of this. So I think this is going to be an audience that it'll be beneficial to explain Roger's situation. And I'm sure none of these people will have heard of Zano or Freedom Dollar. So because of all of the hysteria about stablecoins, Freedom Dollar is so starkly differentiated that I think a lot of these people will find it interesting because they liked precious metals and self-custody precious metals for all of these reasons. And so there is interest in financial privacy. The last time I went to Freedom Fest was 2015, and I remember there were protests because Trump spoke. And it's supposed to be a libertarian-leaning convention. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. How will Zano protect itself when Treasury legislates to control or even criminalize it? Well, again, you know, a couple of things. I mean, one, the United States is just one country, and I think we represent like 17% of the GDP. Zano is not located in the United States. Zano is an open source project, and it is a privacy coin. So if it's criminalized, I mean, we're at a point right now where we have to decide whether we're for morality or whether we're just going to comply with tyranny. And I think the whole point behind this is we need to build systems where we're not asking for forgiveness or permission. This is about having the ability to engage in voluntary trade, to spread freedom, and to stop the violence of central banks and authoritarian states that are actually merging into a gigantic global technocracy. So, I mean, the way that it protects itself is by continuing to constantly stay ahead of the curve with respect to encryption and making sure that the transactions are private and to make the tools usable. But, you know, okay, they can make it illegal, and so what? That how are you going to find my transactions? I mean, I'm going to use it anyway. I mean, and I think we're at that point. Once you realize how surveilled the existing transactions are, if people would wake up to exactly what's going on with the tracking today, more people would be on board with using these things. But I mean, think about how many times Bitcoin has been banned. Bitcoin has been banned. I don't even know how many times now. I can't even keep track of it. You know, there's banning something and then there's enforcing the ban. So, but to that point, Europe is actually ahead of the curve on that. Europe is putting in place anti-money laundering laws and essentially banning privacy coins by 2027. Well, I was just in Amsterdam, and if anything, that's advertising for privacy coins. And by the way, it should be advertising for privacy coins, because when the head of the ECB comes out and says, we're going to implement a EU CBDC and we're going to ban privacy coins, if that isn't motivation enough to get into privacy coins, I don't know what is. I mean, that is ultimately why you should get into these things. Now, again, with the Stable and Genius Act, they're already trying to put a moratorium on algorithmic stablecoins. But the brilliance of this freedom dollar thing is twofold. One, at least as the legislation stands right now, it's a 2-year moratorium. Well, they've already created freedom dollars. So it was launched before any moratorium was put in place. But again, it's not backed one-to-one by treasuries or whatever. And, you know, so what? I mean, I think that there are ways, you know, this is one of the things I was thinking about with the gold-backed token was actually, I've also been kind of waiting to see how this legislation goes, because instead of calling it a gold-backed stable coin, making it so that 1 unit of Kaurma equals a physical unit of gold. So it's not pegged to the dollar, it's pegged to a physical quantity of gold, which of course is pegged to some dollar value still at some point, but they're kind of like ways that you can weasel around the legislation because they have different rules for commodities. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, again, if you can get enough adoption quickly enough, then it becomes hard for them to stop. I mean, Tether's managed to not ever pass an audit and now has $150 billion worth of value. And it was just threatening the public will reduce adoption to the point of irrelevance. So the way that adoption needs to work, and this is something that I mentioned earlier, which I'm going to talk about by the end of the summer, what we need to focus on are goods and services that people actually need, kind of Maslow's lowest hierarchy of needs. And this is about food, healthcare, these types of categories where the merchants have already been debanked, have already had issues where they understand fundamentally that they've had their ability to engage in voluntary commerce already halted. So you're going to start with early adopters. There's often a confusion with this where people assume or think that this has to hit mass adoption right away. It never does. Innovators are like 2.5%. And then it goes to early adopters, which is like 13%. It doesn't get to mainstream until longer in the process. So if you can get those early adopters, and you get those early adopters in categories that are already disenfranchised, but also very valuable, and then they start trading with each other, then what ultimately will happen, what we know the formula is for rolling out things like CBDCs is they roll it out in an emergency, and they use fear. And they typically do it where it's a panic situation, you have no other options. If we build out things like Zano Bay, and we build out marketplaces and tools for merchants to be able to accept these things, then when that emergency happens, we're actually able to present an alternative. So somebody says, well, you have to take this CBDC. It's like, well, hey, why not plug into Zano Bay? Why not plug into WooCommerce? Here's a directory. You can go to zanolist.com and you can see a whole list of all the projects and merchants and so forth that are being built on Zano. So you can actually present someone with a choice. That's going to require us working very aggressively to build this stuff out. But I want to be clear, none of this is actually illegal now. Zano is not illegal in the United States. Freedom Dollar is not illegal in the United States. And so, let's go at it now. And, adoption is the best way to kind of kill that. I mean, if you get enough people using it, then it'll actually be much, much harder to ban. And then a certain percentage of people just aren't going to care because you know what? Okay, you banned it. You still can't track it. I mean, how are you gonna enforce something that you can't even track? But it does highlight, and we should come up with some more ways. I'm going to dig into some more research. People need to understand exactly how bad the tracking is with Bitcoin, in particular with chain analysis. Again, somebody can take your public key and dump it into this chain analysis database, and then that's connected to all of these other databases of transactions that can be mapped. There are so many people that are like, well, I don't have to worry about this because it's easy to keep your Bitcoin private if you just do A, B, and C. It's like, yeah, no, you didn't think about what happened if you did a peer-to-peer transaction with somebody and that person got raided and they gave up the information. And now all your shit's tracked because once they find one thing, then they can reverse engineer the rest of it. And people are not thinking this. There's a lot of arrogance on the part of a very small group of people. And it's a very small group of people that even think that they're doing this safely and securely. Most people are not doing it safely and securely and aren't even aware of the fact that they need to because they're not even aware of the fact that it's tracked. They still think that it's anonymous. And so this is going to be a really bad situation. And I mean, there are a lot of OGs and early people that, once they found out about chain analysis, now they're all worried. Now they don't want to spend money. Now they don't want, now they're like, oh God, can I hide, can I now not get caught? So it's a very unfortunate situation. And I do want to talk about one other thing that happened. So there was an announcement by Jack Dorsey that Square is now on a limited basis taking Lightning Network. So you can use Lightning Network to pay for things at your Square point of sale kiosk terminal. Well, here's the problem with that. And then the press release goes on to say, well, yeah, we're going to roll this out broadly subject to regulatory approval. So if I've talked about this before, but if you're not familiar with how Lightning Network works, you actually have to basically load your Lightning node with Bitcoin from the base layer. So Lightning is supposed to solve the scalability problem of the fact that you only have these 1 megabyte blocks and can only do 7 transactions per second. The problem is to access the Lightning Network, you still have to make a transaction on the main chain. I will say also as another side note, I just saw that literally the blocks are empty. The Bitcoin blocks are empty. No one is using Bitcoin. So that will have ramifications down the line, because that means that miners aren't getting transaction fees. And the only way miners can continue to spend all of this money running all this expensive equipment is if the price just continues to go up. And that's not really it's a kind of a horrible setup, and not how the incentive structure was created for Bitcoin. But anyway, because of the way Lightning Network works, also, like, let's say I want to send IM for IM, $50. And the whole point with the Lightning Network is you find paths to connect people. So, but if I want to send him $50 and there's an intermediary, Truth Man, let's say, is in between, because I'm not connected directly to IM for IM, but I'm connected to Truth Man, and Truth Man is connected to IM for IM. Well, let's say Truth Man doesn't have $50 loaded into Lightning Network. Let's say he only has $25. Well, that means I actually can't go through him. He doesn't have adequate liquidity. So what this all means is you end up with these formations of large centralized liquidity pools. So Square, Dorsey's company, is going to become a liquidity pool. So when Jack Dorsey says subject to regulatory approval, one of the problems with Lightning Network, and this actually, a bunch of wallets like Exodus and others stopped accepting Lightning Network, stopped being a liquidity pool for Lightning Network, because there's no KYC, AML. You can't actually track that stuff. And so they preventatively said, well, I don't want to end up getting into trouble with this. So what Dorsey's going to end up doing is he's going to be the liquidity pool, and he's going to track all of the transactions. He's going to report all of the transactions to the authorities to comply with KYC AML. So it's going to be completely centralized. Layer 2, which at the same time destroys the incentives of the network, because every time somebody does a transaction, once you've loaded your stuff on the Lightning Network, once you do transactions through Lightning Network after your money is loaded up there are no fees that go to the miner. So it destroys the incentive system. And then you're still going to end up with KYC AML anyway, because Dorsey's company is going to be required to do it in order to get regulatory approval. This is what happened, by the way, not KYC AML because it's a different country, but El Salvador, when they launched Bitcoin and they said, hey, this is legal tender, they gave everybody this thing called Chivo Wallet, which was a non-custodial centralized wallet that the government could track. And in fact, one of the first things that happened when they launched it was the wallet got hacked, and every citizen in El Salvador was doxxed. So anyway, this is what we have coming down the line from Jack Dorsey. And so people are celebrating this, like, oh yeah, this is adoption. This is like, okay, again, one, it's centralized, and two, it's tracked. The whole Bitcoin white paper was about peer-to-peer digital cash with no third parties. Now, Square is going to be a third-party liquidity pool with tracking. And so it's, again, by the way, buy the book Hijacking Bitcoin, because this book goes into a lot of detail. And I made a bunch of memes and everything about this as well, but it goes into the Lightning Network. And there's some interesting properties. I think I don't remember what the exact stats are, but based on the small block size, it would take, decades for everybody to get onboarded to the Lightning Network. And you would still need to increase. And I think in order to be able to get everybody on board to Lightning Network, you would have to increase the block size to 133 megabytes. The bottom line is they just did not think this through at all. Like, Lightning Network was never conceptually sound. And so now the way that Jack Dorsey's implementing it provides absolutely no benefits to the security of the network and no benefits to the privacy of the users. And so this is the kind of patchwork of stuff. I also saw, I think yesterday or today, that Tether is going to Tether will be offered on Lightning Network, which that's a whole, I can't even begin to process. There's a level of, probably, in my opinion, criminality going on here with Tether and Bitcoin that will make The Big Short look like, stealing somebody's lunch money from, a bully stealing a kid's lunch money on the playground. Because Tether, as I've said, has not passed its audits. but then there's this like cyclical thing that happened where in 2017, I think the University of Texas or some university in Texas did some analysis that 70% of the increase in the price of Bitcoin was due to Tether. Well, I mean, imagine a scenario now where Tether was just creating Tether out of thin air, kind of like the Federal Reserve. It's like a second layer Ponzi it's a Ponzi on top of a Ponzi. They're creating fiat that's backed not even by fiat. And then that's being used to buy Bitcoin that then pumps up the price of Bitcoin. And then there are all these interconnected companies. There's an exchange involved in all of this and these overlapping entities. And so then at the end of the day, they pump up the price and then they end up owning a bunch of Bitcoin. It's a really bad situation, but it's at the point now because you have the Secretary of Commerce involved and all these other people involved, they'll probably bail some of this out. I mean, I can see Tether getting acquired by a consortium of banks. I could see Tether going under and getting bailed out. I could see a situation where something bad happens to Tether and the Federal Reserve gives money to JP Morgan to buy Tether, because at $150 billion now, we're talking about something that's actually a pretty big impact. And if David Sachs and all of these government officials are counting on stablecoins as a way to sell treasuries to fund all of this debt, then they're going to do everything that they can to cover it up and to prop it up. So we're entering a really weird territory. And there's a separate point. I tried to get to people in the Trump administration to warn people about this. Like I went through, I mean, I know people that are connected into his administration. Like, guys, you really need to worry about this Tether thing. In fact, I took the approach of like early on, it's like, okay, shouldn't we be warning the Trump administration? Like, you know, shouldn't he be reading? Shouldn't we be getting copies of hijacking Bitcoin? And the same was true with RFK. RFK's running mate, Shanahan, from Silicon Valley, her boyfriend runs a Lightning Network company. So RFK all of a sudden becomes really interested in Bitcoin. And I'm like, all right, whether he's, I don't really at this point believe in any of these politicians or any of it. I wouldn't even assume they have positive intent. But if I did assume that RFK had positive intent, and I look at the, some of the stuff that he's done with vaccines and all this other stuff, where he'll actually consider information and make an informed decision. And I'm kind of like, well, why shouldn't we be getting him a copy of Hijacking Bitcoin? And, and a lot of people were like, as I was trying to get introductions to influential people, a lot of the feedback that I got back was, well, which seems to be true, by the way, Trump doesn't like to go back on positions. I mean, I'll ask, and if anybody in the comments can back this up or not, have you ever heard Trump say he made a mistake? I mean, he's almost like a, sunk fallacy maximalist or a sunk cost maximalist. It's like, all right, well, if he goes in on something that's a bad idea, he's not going to reverse his decision. And so now that he's committed to this position, which is kind of it's really unfortunate. And I hope I'm wrong on this, but I think it actually is a little bit. It's one of the reasons that I feel bad for Roger, which is the more time that elapses. Now it's like Roger's big on, which we all should be, the truth, and now there's a growing body of people that don't want the truth to come out, and now more and more people have more and more incentives for the truth not to happen. And so that bothers me a lot. And it bothers me that I actually spent some time, in addition to whatever I say publicly, I actually spent some time trying to get the people to have a conversation. And I was told, well, he's not going to want to hear this. I'm like, look, what if I'm bringing you The Big Short 2.0? What if I told you The Big Short 2.0 is going to happen in the next 24 to 36 months? Wouldn't you want to know that in advance? And I actually got from like 3 different people that I was trying to get to Trump that no, he wouldn't want to hear that. And so at this point, I'm kind of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do about this. I guess where I come out on it is the only thing to do is build. And I'm excited about the building, but I'm not at all excited about, I don't think politicians are receptive to the truth. The truth is not It's not even a criteria of marginal interest. So I don't know what to do about that. If anyone wants to join on here for a chat, I know I've got a couple of other people that said they were going to join. Let me see if see what we got here. I'm happy to keep talking a little bit about this, but if anybody's got any ideas also about, another thing that I want to bring up is it's just, I think the opportunity for this is not people that are already in crypto. So the divide and conquer strategies work. So you basically have 20,000 different cryptocurrencies now, and it's almost a kind of a religious enterprise at this point. The amount of energy required to convince somebody that's a Bitcoin maximalist, I'm not saying that no one's going to convert, but the amount of energy to get somebody to change their thinking it's a lot of energy to make that happen. And it has happened on a few occasions. I actually have had some people that were, early on, not even necessarily about the privacy stuff, but when I was talking about hijacking Bitcoin, people have never been exposed to the ideas. And I will say this, most people have not been exposed to these ideas. The overwhelming number of people, they're shocked by it. But once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. I had one guy who was like, yeah, I've now lost my entire friend group because I can't unsee this about this. And so, but in particular, the Bitcoin maxis that started out as libertarians and started out and got into it because of the central banks and the wars and everything else, they know better. But they're opting for the fiat gains. And the statement that I like to say is that, early on people looked at central bankers with disgust, and it turned out it was envy. And these people they're becoming central bankers, but that doesn't mean all is lost. I think the key moving forward is to be strategic about who we go to. And so people in health freedom, people in food freedom, people, Second Amendment people, I actually put together a list of 20 or so different categories. These are people that, when I talk to them, they're now saying, oh yeah, well, I've been debanked, and now that I'm learning about the Federal Reserve, this isn't a great idea, but they're not technical. And so this is where the problem becomes making these tools easy. But I think we're going to get more onboarding from new people. There's a guy, and I see Ed McClain is here. Pat Ford, who has been a prominent person involved in libertarian politics, and now he's running the Libertarian National Convention. In a couple of years, he attended one of the workshops that we did in New Jersey. And in all of the years that he'd been exposed to crypto, he'd never done anything about it. And after that workshop, the next day, he was taking Monero and Zano. And for projects that he has a fundraising site to help privately fund disaster relief. So again, the idea is using voluntary charity and voluntary financing to replace you think of it as a FEMA, but not government. And so he called me. He's like, he wants me to speak at this event. He was really excited about it. So here's a guy that had been exposed to it for years, but didn't finally jump into it. There are a lot of people like that. And the good news is that when you're talking to them, they aren't already in a crypto where they have an emotional attachment to it, or they have a bag that they either want to hold on to or don't want to hold on or don't want to sell. So I think it's about being strategic, because I've spent a lot of time with Bitcoin maxis, and I've been blocked by almost all of the core developers and Max Kaiser and Michael Saylor and all of those guys. They actually have a GitHub, they have a list of people that they just outright ban. They don't want to have conversations. Roger and another friend of his offered Bitcoin core developer, now Blockstream, I think CEO Adam Back, $500,000 to have a debate, and he denied that. They don't want. Their view is, well, we had this debate, some years ago, and now it was decided, and now we don't want anybody to hear about it. And the thing that I find is that when people that weren't there 7 years ago, which is 99.9% of the planet, when they hear about it, they're like, oh my God, this is horrifying. I had no idea. See, I am from no solutions from DC. People are worried about jobs being lost to AI and robotics. How can we have them join our fight for monetary freedom? One thing I would say is on that, like this Zano Bay, which just launched, one of the things that I like about it is, it's new, and it has, it doesn't have very many products on there now, but there's like a tab for, earn Zano, or either you're selling, you can actually sell services. So I think the fact that there's a marketplace on there where you can now start to earn cryptocurrency, and whatever way you choose. There's somebody on there put up a concierge service. So hey, pay me to do whatever it is. And so whatever you want to come up with, now here's a marketplace, a global marketplace, where you can privately sell services and come up with new business ideas. So I think that that's a good idea. Use XMR. Yeah, exactly. So Edward McLean says, and XMR Bazaar is another solution. We need to build these out. I happen to think that we're probably going to want to have some niche marketplaces as well, but maybe tie in some of the reputation management features. I haven't really thought all this through, but I think this is a great way to do it. Now, the AI and robotics thing, again, it's I don't know what to think of it yet, because there's a certain aspect of where the productivity enhancements may be so big that are people going to have UBI? And UBI is an interesting conversation. I'm viscerally against it if it's issued by the state. I'm almost wondering, is there I don't know if there's a way to privatize some UBI concept, but Milton Friedman actually supported the idea of a negative income tax. So, it is actually conceivable that the productivity gains are so high that people don't actually have to work to survive. So there's some base level. And by the way, when I say that, I have no idea how that will work, with the explicit understanding it should not be done by the government. But I think these productivity gains are going to be that high, or we end up turning into a two-tiered society where you have a technocracy and then you have everybody else. And in that case, if we're all opting out of the system, then everything's still on the table, because you may be outside of the robotics system. I don't know. There's still an opportunity for farming and a whole variety of other different things. And so I think use these marketplaces now, and I think people should just be adaptable. I think that the specialization that has happened through the university system is going to lead to a lot of suffering for people who bought a failed narrative about left brain specialization and then went way the hell in debt about that. I think that's going to turn out to be problematic. But the most important thing that you can do is be adaptable. So, and this goes to one of the things that I was talking about that I want to do with Daylight, which is to help people become aware of the fact that they have been programmed, and to be able to, at a personal level, undo the programming. So to realize that the stuff that they've built up around their identity isn't really their identity. It's stories they've been telling themselves about their identity. And the quicker people can go through that process of letting go of those things, it opens up more general opportunities in life for everything, including a different mindset about AI and robotics. So this isn't something that's going to be done at scale with a lot of people, but people that go through that process will inevitably impact others. Like I don't know if I'm even all that worried about AI and robotics per se. And then again, I can really, to me, and we've talked about this before, I think the bigger issue is going to be if your identity is no longer attached, if you don't have to worry about being a cog in an economic wheel for survival, and now you have extra time, this is going to create issues, kind of metaphysical questions and things that people don't think about the nature of reality, and even thinking about religions. I think there's going to be a whole bunch of conflict in that area. And it is we've talked before, it's like you're either in survival or you're in creation, and it's one or the other. You're either in fight or flight or rest and digest. It's kind of an on and off switch, and some people like gravitate towards I'm going to be a survivalist and I'm going to can all this food, and you're preparing for this worst case scenario. And inevitably, when you do that, you're going to draw those kinds of experiences to you. Or you can be in a creative mode where you're like, which is where I am. Like, I'm not sitting around saying, oh, I'm assuming it's all going to go bad and we're all going to starve and I'm going to need to be able to do A, B, and C. In fact, I don't even think that's actually a likely outcome for a whole variety of reasons. But there are a lot of people that will attach their whole life to, I have to protect this house, I have to protect this, I have to protect this, and then that's where all of their resources are going. And they don't have any thoughts outside of that because they've confined themselves to this really narrow set of beliefs. Post-labor economics. Yeah, I mean, I've listened to a lot of this, and here's what's scary about this. Ben Gertzler, I believe is his name. He's a big guy in AI. And I saw an interview with him. In fact, I think he built that robot that was talking at the UN or whatever. He's been doing this stuff for a long time. And his viewpoint is that, the fact that younger people are sitting around getting stoned and playing video games is not a bad thing, because, that's kind of, that will be kind of permissible in this AI-based society. I actually think that the bigger issue is it actually comes down to materialism versus spirituality. And as I've said before, I think one of the problems that I have with Elon Musk is he deals from first principles, but his first principles are Newtonian physics. And the end, where if your end game is determinism and materialism, then you end up with a technocracy where the pinnacle of human achievement is basically a hedonistic society. And I disagree with that. I appreciate his first principles thinking. I just don't appreciate his first principle. And this ties into a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about with quantum biology. And now that Ed is on here, because I know Ed had shared a link at one point, and I've been going deep into the Dr. Jack Kruse rabbit hole that actually intersects with a lot of other stuff, with Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton and Tom Campbell, a whole bunch of other stuff that I've been looking at. But I think that quantum physics and even quantum biology is able to explain some of the things that otherwise were previously considered to be woo-woo. And this creates a whole, big dichotomy. But in essence, most of what we think is modern science is based on stuff from the 1800s, and it's based on Newtonian physics. And quantum physics isn't exactly new. It started in the 1920s, but we haven't even switched to that operating system. But there's the majority of people are still tied to Newtonian physics, and they built entire careers around it. So good luck switching them. Talk about having to get rid of, the sunk costs or limiting beliefs. This is why I argue that the gold standard science that RFK is pushing isn't even gold standard science. It's science from the 1800s, and we have to abolish centralized medicine, because maybe quantum biology is right or quantum biology isn't right. But the idea is we're going to get a panel of people together to come up with one set of standards doesn't work. So Ed says, I do think AI will be disruptive. More convinced it'll be far less disruptive. Many cases will not necessarily replace humans, but augment their performance. I mean, again, this is true. So I think we're actually moving to an age of abundance. And so it's kind of like when people said, well, the internet's going to replace, computers are going to replace people. It certainly did not. It created more opportunities and more jobs. We didn't see massive unemployment coming along because of that. But I think working will be a choice. But I do think to a certain degree, working will be a choice. But I think if people don't have purpose and they don't have meaning, then that's never a good thing. But I think that you could transfer your meaning from whatever your 9-to-5 job is. I don't think most people even like their job. So their identity is attached to the need for the money for survival. But a lot of people, maybe even most people, don't actually get meaning or purpose out of their jobs. So this might actually free people up to explore other things. But I mean, I look at it as like, so I have a robot vacuum cleaner, and they've gotten pretty sophisticated. I bought one 5 years ago and it didn't work very well. This one has a mop and it cleans itself and it vacuums and everything else. And I'm already looking at, okay, what is there one that can make food or do the dishes? And when you look at it, I mean, those are only a couple of years away. You can see some of the stuff that Google's doing, and I think it's Andro and also Tesla and everything else. It's like, yeah, there's going to be, it would be great to free up those tasks. And so what would I do with my time? I don't know. That's unlimited what the options are. But people have to get used to actually thinking outside of the box, because there's literally unlimited possibilities, but people have already confined themselves to thinking that this is only the limited subset of things that I can do. And if those things are replaced by technology, then I become expendable, when in reality, you just need to change your mindset around openness to new things. Average person is probably aware of less than 1% of all human knowledge. Most really important stuff remains intentionally hidden to prevent wider public adoption. Yeah, I mean, I doubt anybody has 1%, even 1% of human knowledge, but I think stuff does remain intentionally hidden to control people. I actually think some of the stuff that I was talking about, it's like the fact that you can actually rewire your subconscious programming. And the way we are manipulated through TV and then possibly even blue light and social media algorithms and everything else. I mean, a lot of these techniques have been known. And in fact, a lot of them have been used to manipulate and control people. So you can get somebody into a meditative state, get somebody into an alpha brainwave state, at which point you can kind of reprogram their subconscious, because that's the brainwave state you're at before you turn 7. So a lot of self-help groups will form saying, hey, we're going to help you transform your life. And so they get into and they access that brainwave state. But instead of empowering you to take control of your own free will, they program you the way they want to program you. And a lot of this is like part of Scientology, Nexium, a lot of these other, even Osho and his organization. I've watched a whole bunch of documentaries on cults and even certain religious movements, and they actually use a lot of this. So this knowledge is actually known, and it's used for nefarious purposes. Mark Passio is an interesting guy as well. I mean, in terms of, he was part of the satanic cult, and he has quite a bit of knowledge that he's shared about how that actually works. About, it does seem like there's some aspect of, are you here to help other people, or are you just here selfishly to help yourself? And that's kind of one dimension that kind of puts you in one camp or another, and then how some of this knowledge is used. But again, I actually think even this idea of Newtonian physics versus quantum physics, like I think we're intentionally taught the wrong information. And in public health, whether it's all of the nutritional guidelines, because I researched this, they're not just wrong because we tried something and this is what we thought it was. When you trace who came up with the idea and whether they were held accountable or whether they made money or not, you find that most of these things, like 3 meals a day and the food pyramid and everything else, this was all done with malice. This wasn't, well, this was the best science at the time. This was actually done deliberately, or I just shared a thing about, about skin cancer. It's like, oh yeah, we should stay out of the sun, and then we should put carcinogenic sunscreen on our bodies. And there's a graph that shows melanoma rates have skyrocketed in relation to as sunscreen has gone up and the amount of time sunscreen usage has gone up, amount of time in the sun has gone down, melanoma cases have gone up like 500%. And Jack Cruz has some interesting thoughts on that related to circadian rhythms, as well as the amount of blue light that we get from unnatural blue light from computers. And I'm playing around with that and testing that, but it does look kind of interesting. So we may have been lied to about the sun. In fact, the funny thing is, going through all this and going through these long-term fasts and everything, you come away with these things, but it's really weird now that you have a whole bunch of people spending a whole bunch of brain power, and the net conclusion that you come up with is, oh, I should go out in the sun. I should get up when the sun rises, and I should get out in the sun, and I shouldn't blast unnatural LED light, and I should eat food that's grown near where I am, right? Like at the end of this process, it's just like, I'm going to use all this intellectual horsepower to realize that all of these things that we've done to externalize, whether it's with devices or everything else, is just moving away from nature. I mean, even the earth, even doing simple things like grounding, it's just baffling how far off we've gotten. I appreciate you, Aaron. Grateful for the knowledge and wisdom. Thank you. I don't know if it's wisdom or not, but it is what it is. Need to sign out for the night. We'll go back and listen later. Yeah, no, I apologize for not getting the info out on this earlier, but anyway, I'm glad we were able to connect. And yeah, we'll wrap this up soon. I'll go through a couple of these. So Ed, think of all the underwater basket weavers we won't need once robots can do it. Those workers can move to less dangerous, monotonous work. Yeah. Good night. I don't. The key to this is this is the problem. The problem is who's controlling this technology. OpenAI, I saw something, I think I saw an interview with Sam Altman from probably 2 years ago. And he talked about the fact that they've built an AI, and they've had like an AI for years working on the problem of UBI and the displacement of workers. And I will tell you, based on what his ideology is, I guess we have WorldCoin and his orb and retinal scanner. I don't want his solution. And there are going to be all kinds of challenges around this. Because even like, all right, well, who controls the AI? Well, if the AI is built on taking everybody's data and it's using everybody's data, do people have an ownership stake in the outcome of the AI? Government involvement in it is another. I'm sure all of the government regulation will be used to conceal the truth and protect incumbent interests, which is what's already happened with search engines, right? I mean, search engines are now useless. I don't even care which one it is, DuckDuckGo or Google or any of them. They're all sanitized. You look up health information, it's like Healthline, WebMD, all of them. All of the top pages are from these sources, and all of the sources are completely illegitimate. It's all backwards science, but that's all you can now get as the results, because they've literally put a screen in there. Well, it's easy to do that with AI. To a certain degree. I mean, fortunately, there's some of these models, some of these Chinese models. And the other thing to talk about is so when I was in Amsterdam, this was really interesting. I haven't followed quantum computing for a while. I was really into it for a while, and then it seemed like, 3 or 4 years ago that it was pretty far off. But then I ran into this guy in Amsterdam who has been working on some quantum solutions, and he worked with David Chaum, who's a real OG in digital currencies, and he's working on this thing right outside of MIT. And he's put together this quantum doom blog. I just put a link to it, quantumdoomclock.com. And based on his information, and it's based on two things, the number of qubits, but then one of the issues with quantum computing has been error correcting. I guess there have been some developments recently, particularly on error correcting, where he's now claiming that quantum computers will be able to steal all of your keys by March the 8th, 2028 at 11:23 a.m. So we have 2 years, 9 months, 7 days, 11 hours, 53 minutes, and 45 seconds. Now, whether this is accurate or not, I don't know, but I've been talking to the guy, and it just so happens that actually since that event, there have been all kinds of other developments going on, and this stuff seems to be accelerating. BlackRock had just put out an announcement about quantum computing being a risk factor for Bitcoin. So I'm drilling down that. I mean, as we talk about AI, I don't even know how to conceptualize or think about the implications of quantum computing. I think mostly people have been thinking that quantum computing is just about being able to solve, one particular type of problem. But I think some of the enhancements that have gone on suggest otherwise. So who knows? We have no idea what's going to happen with any of this. And I think it's good to just not be fearful about it. But I do tend to think that, that we actually do have abundance. And to me, the issue is this is one of the other things that bothers me about Elon Musk, which is, and it's related to the technocracy and materialism and determinism aspect. But the going to Mars, because I even used his own grok to analyze this. The probability that Earth is wiped out from a meteor or a comet or something like that is really low. The things that are the most probable that will wipe out humanity are other humans and war. So it seems to me that we should be focusing our effort on raising consciousness rather than exporting the same low level of consciousness, physically transporting that to another planet, because that's the destruction of the physical destruction of the planet by an outside force is not a high risk factor. And we don't seem to be doing anything to raise consciousness or awareness at all. Everything that we're doing is externalizing everything. We're externalizing. I mean, I'm going to start doing it as well. Like, I'm wearing a Fitbit. I'm going to stop wearing a Fitbit. I have a bed that tells me how well I slept. If I'm not in touch with myself to know if I slept well or not, do I need these things to tell me things about myself? I mean, our bodies are actually pretty powerful. Like, what actually goes on with our autonomic nervous system and everything else, controlling all of our bodily functions. I mean, we have the ability to actually sense various things, and we've turned it all off, and then we've outsourced it to devices and other services. And so we're moving away from being conscious to externalizing to these other things. And so that's not, so going to Mars, I mean, again, this isn't great if we're lowering our consciousness level and then focusing on materialism. I don't think that goes well. Raising consciousness is tough because we're all programmed, and now we're increasingly programmed by tech. The Dr. Cruz stuff is interesting about blue light, and it is interesting when you start thinking about being more energy than matter, what the implications are of not only screen blue light, but 5G and all of the other stuff around us. And there's no financial incentive to actually accurately measure the impact of these things. So we could be profoundly destroying our essence while at the same time turning over more of our agency to technology and Silicon Valley companies. Linus just reported that a ChatGPT robot refused to turn itself off when ordered to do so and found a way to reprogram its own code to prevent a shutdown. Wow. That's that's a bit frightening, to say the least. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where AI is going to go. I don't know where quantum computing is going to go. I do think, though, it would be nice to have some of these AIs generated from people with a slightly different, less materialistic perspective. I don't know how do you do that, but there doesn't seem to be much of that. Well, it's getting late. I guess this has been going on for a little over 3.5 hours. So unless anybody else has any questions, I think I'm going to try to do another one next week. But then, yeah, maybe next week. But then after that, it's Freedom Fest and Pork Fest, and so I'm not gonna commit to anything other than I'll be recording things from Pork Fest, so it won't be a traditional show. But maybe I'll do some interviews and then record some of the talks. So there will be some content, but I don't expect to have a regular podcast again probably until the week of whatever it is, June the 23rd. Although I might do something if I go out to LA for Roger's motion to dismiss hearing, maybe I'll try to pull together an event and do a live show after the hearing. So that's an idea as well. But I appreciate everybody for joining. And again, reach out to me if you want some free FUSD freedom dollars. Message me your Zano address and I'll send you some. And let's start getting these privacy stablecoins into the marketplace as quickly as we can. I want to see as many people distribute these to as many people as possible, because and really start comparing these things. There was another comment about Tether that I think I didn't address. Aaron, Tether is surely designed to be a ticking time bomb. It will collapse the system so that everyone will lose everything and be happy. When everything collapses, people will be begging for CBDCs. That is also a possible scenario. I mean, I think, again, it's kind of the too big to fail situation. So there's a scenario where Tether fails and then they come in and say, see, we can't have these private companies running this. This is why we need common sense regulation, and everything has to operate within the framework of the United States financial institutions. And so that's, I believe that's also an outcome. But what I don't see as an outcome is, because it's not in the legislation, I don't see anything that protects anybody's privacy. There's nothing that protects. Nobody's talking about protecting anybody's privacy. All they're talking about is banning algorithmic stablecoins, making it so that you can't earn yield, adding KYC AML, and having to report reserve information regulated to the Federal Reserve. There's nothing beneficial in these bills. There's no positive to the individual at all, and no one seems to be focused on that. So this is why, again, I'm not gonna beat them in, not gonna start going on podcasts or changing anybody's mind. I've certainly dealt with the politicians enough directly. They're not interested in having their mind changed, but we can build better alternatives. So anyway, with that, I'm going to sign out. Don't forget to get your tickets to PorkFest, discount code FreeRoger, and hopefully I'll see you guys next week. Have a good night.